The Legacy is Book 1 in the Slayer Academy series. Published by Tamsin Baker, 2021. Copyright owned by Harley Romance Publishing. Chapter 1. A writhing mass of sweaty people on the dance floor was really not my scene. Especially tonight. There was something in the air, a tingle at the back of my neck, and I hadn't put my finger on what it was just yet. I shook myself and tried to ignore my intuition that said to keep an eye out for anything that looked suspicious. But as I glanced around the club, all I saw were teenagers carrying on like it was the last day of summer vacay. Though to be fair, it kinda was. For me, the last day of high school had come and gone 12 months ago, thank God, and I'd gotten a year of community college under my belt. Summer was here, and break was quickly melting away beneath the heat of the sun. But that didn't mean I wanted to spend every spare second in these underage clubs my friends liked so much. The thump of the bass pushed through my chest like a brick wall. My very pulse beat in time with the music around us, making my ears sing. And not in a good way. I closed my eyes and tried to enjoy the sensations since I was already here. If I were being honest, I would rather be home with a good book and a hot chocolate. Come on. Let's dance, Megara. Holly, my best friend since junior year, tugged at my hand with the enthusiasm of a person who actually enjoyed these places. I waved at her with my free hand. You go. I'll watch for a while. I twisted my fingers to detach her from tugging at me. Holly put her hands on her hips and pouted. You're no fun. I laughed at her assessment, because I agreed. If this was fun, then no, I wasn't fun. But that didn't mean I didn't love Holly or Claire, the friend we'd come to celebrate tonight. I really needed to change my attitude, or I'd ruin the night for everyone. I sighed and tried my best to pull out of the black mood this club had put me in. I might not be fun, but I wasn't usually this morose or on edge. I wasn't sure what had gotten into me, but I couldn't settle into the party vibe tonight. I leaned forward to speak into Holly's ear. She would never hear me over the music otherwise. You think we should go over and say happy birthday to Claire? Holly's eyes lit up and she nodded. We turned toward the stage and scanned the crowd, trying to find Claire, who'd invited us. There were too many people dancing, pushing and laughing to spot her clearly, and the music was so loud I could barely hear myself think. Why couldn't we just go to dinner, or a movie? Somewhere we could actually have a conversation. There she is. Holly yelled at me over the music and jumped up and down. Let's go. She took my hand again and dragged me over the dance floor between heaving bodies and young men with too many muscles and no brains. The girls weren't much better. The clothes, the makeup. Why did girls my age try so hard to look older? I wasn't rushing to grow up. Which was one of the reasons why I'd put off going to a real college the past year, and stayed local. This year, I was thinking I wouldn't even continue on with community college. I wanted to travel, relax, be young and free. I wasn't trudging down the mortgage road just yet, irrespective of how smart everyone said I was. Holly and I wove between the thrusting girls on the dance floor and around the guys who watched on the sidelines, finally arriving at a solid wood bar that served mocktails and every energy drink under the sun. I heaved out a relieved sigh, then shivered as a strange alertness shot down my spine. I twisted around, glancing this way and that. Was someone staring at me? What was this strange feeling that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end? Holly grabbed my hand and tugged on me, pulling my focus back to the task at hand. Greeting Claire and grabbing a drink. We found Claire nestled amongst a group of guys, most of whom I remembered from high school. Holly poked me in the ribs and I focused. Happy birthday, Claire, we chorused together. The birthday girl swung around to see us, squealed, and threw herself at Holly. Oh my God, I'm so glad you guys came. Then she jumped for me and I hugged her back, laughing as she almost toppled both of us over in her enthusiasm. Claire was sweet. Not the brightest bulb in the chandelier, as my dad would say, but she had always been a lovely person and I was glad she was a friend. As we pulled apart, Claire smiled at me. Happiness struck me like a slap to the heart. I was suddenly glad Holly had dragged me out tonight. Claire was worth celebrating. I was going to miss her when I was traveling. "What are you drinking?" I asked her, noting the almost empty glass in her hand. "Sunrise Twist." She grinned, reciting a mocktail name. I turned to the waiting bartender and ordered her another. "A Sunrise Twist, please." He smiled as he poured multiple liquids into a tumbler, then lit the purple drink on fire. The cool colors swirled beneath the flames, transfixing my gaze. "Amazing," I said as I grabbed the glass and handed it to the birthday girl. "To another fantastic year, Claire." "Thank you so much." She took the mocktail and blew on the flames with a giggle like it was a birthday candle. I paid for her drink, some exorbitant amount that blew straight through my budget for the night, and put paid to my plans to get one for myself as well. I turned back to Holly, who swayed to the music where she stood next to me. A cute guy with spiky blonde hair moved over from the crowd and tapped her on the shoulder. Holly turned to him, and he leaned down and spoke into her ear. She beamed at him, that killer smile of hers coming out to play. My best friend had always gotten any guy she wanted. And no one could hate her for it, because she was just too nice. Not even me, with all my bad luck with guys. Holly leaned closer to me. "He wants me to dance. Do you mind if I ditch you for a bit?" "Not at all. Go." I shooed her away with a smile. She laughed as the guy towed her into the middle of the dance floor. A slightly envious sigh left my lips as I watched her. Her long blonde hair accentuated how sexy she was as she grooved along to the music. The guy who had taken her to dance couldn't move to save his life. But he was wrapped with Holly, grinning and trying to hold her as she danced. I wished I was like her, confident and sexy and easy to hang around. Instead, I was anything but confident. I tugged at the stupidly short skirt Holly had made me wear. The self-imposed dress code for the evening was cocktail, and Holly said Claire would enforce it. As I glanced over to where the birthday girl was getting suspiciously drunk, interesting given it was an underage event and we were only supposed to be served non-alcoholic drinks, I realized she wouldn't have cared what I wore. But Holly had insisted. It was a birthday party after all, at a nightclub. My jeans were not welcome. But this skirt that Holly had dressed me in, and the skimpy top accompanying it, was barely more than a strip of material covering my ass and breasts. And even if I had been slightly tempted to join my friend in her dancing tonight, this outfit did not make it possible. I didn't want anyone, let alone strangers in the room, knowing the color of my panties. And that was exactly what would happen if I tried to dance in this mini skirt. But I was happy for my best friend, who could dance and flirt as easily as breathing no matter what she wore. Tanya, one of our other school friends who was here to celebrate Claire's birthday, sidled up next to me, her colorful mocktail in hand. "Hey Meg, what are you doing next semester? Back to college again?" I stifled a groan. To transfer or not to transfer to a new school? Or not to go back at all? A never-ending stress in my life at the moment, and a question I didn't have the answer for as yet. "Don't know," I admitted, flipping my hair awkwardly out of my face. "I'm thinking of a gap year, actually." Why would I permanently move out of home? Leave my parents? And begin a life somewhere I didn't know I wanted to be? She raised her eyebrows as she chewed on her straw. "Oh, really? I thought with your scores you could get in anywhere." Yep, that was me. The bookworm, the nerd. Well, I've gotten accepted to a few colleges. Amherst, Williams and SUNY. But I just don't know what appeals. My parents had taken me to the open houses, kind of begrudgingly. Which was surprising. Most parents who had kids like me were excited by the prestige these small universities brought them. Yet none of the ones I visited had felt like home to me. Not last year and certainly not this year either. Everything felt wrong and I couldn't put my finger on why. None of the incredible old and beautiful campuses had inspired me or excited me. I didn't know how I was supposed to invest the next 3 years of my life into a place that I couldn't stand to be in even for a few hours. You're too picky, Meg. I wanted to roll my eyes at Tanya, but instead forced a smile to my lips. Yeah, I suppose I am. I glanced around the room, a shiver rolling through me once more. I ran my hands up and down my arms, trying to warm up. Without Holly by my side, that strange darkness began to creep in once again, and I felt like someone was studying me and finding me wanting. I didn't fit in here, I didn't fit in many places at all. And thanks to the girl standing next to me, I didn't want to be here anymore. I'll see you later. I waved at Tanya and hurried away from her, my skin itching with the need to turn and locate whoever was staring at me. I managed to not give in and turn, but as much as I wanted to scurry out of the club and head home, I knew I couldn't leave, not without Holly. Maybe a change of scenery was all I needed. I walked around the crowd the best I could, saying "excuse me" 100 times, while I wove through the sea of bodies and dancing teenagers. I finally made it to a corner where there were less people, and leaned against the wall. I could breathe there and watch Holly from a safe distance. I pulled my cell phone from the tiny bag Holly had allowed me to bring, and checked the time. Only 11 o'clock? Shit. How much longer do I have to stay? Hey. How are you? A male voice slid into my ear and warmed my body like honey. I heard him perfectly, even over the thump of the music. His voice was smooth and deep and at odds with the barely adult males around us. I turned toward the voice, and my gaze connected with the man before me. He was no teenage boy. My stomach tightened and my heart jumped. He was the most beautiful person I'd ever seen in my life, and as I stared into his eyes, I shivered once again. Only this shiver was not caused by cold. This shiver shot straight through every part of my body, and centered between my legs in a lick of desire stronger than anything I had ever felt in my life. Holy shit! This person, this absolutely beautiful man, was the reason why my instincts had been going haywire and warning me to run. He'd been the one watching me. And from the way my heart began to pound with equal parts fear and desire, I could sense he was 100% dangerous in every way. Chapter 2. Despite the sudden dread coursing through my veins, I couldn't drag my eyes away from the angel standing in front of me. Maybe he was a figment of my imagination? Or I'd already made it home and was dreaming about the night? Hello, I'm Fury, he said, accompanying the words with a sexy grin that lit up his stunning blue eyes. I stuck out my hand without thinking. It was my immediate response, born of politeness. One of the many lessons my parents had drummed into me since I was a child. Hi, I'm Megara. Meg for short. He looked at my hand a little strangely, as if he hadn't expected the action, then put out his own. Nice to meet you, he said. His palm touched mine and he squeezed my hand a little too long before letting go. My belly tightened and hot attraction pulsed between us. The desire was unexpected, but not surprising, considering the beauty of the man before me. That wasn't the problem. The problem was the fact that the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end once again, and the sense of danger in the room grew. I swallowed a gasp. I'd learned a long time ago not to ignore my instincts about people. Or places. I always knew when something bad was about to happen. I didn't know how that was possible, and I'd never confided in anyone except my parents about my weird abilities. But I trusted them, because they were always right. And there was something immensely dangerous about this guy. I just couldn't be certain if the danger he posed was more generalized, or if it pertained directly to me. You want to get out of here? He asked suddenly, like he was the romantic hero in some movie. Was I being punked or something? I looked around the room for a minute, but didn't spot anything out of the ordinary. And certainly not a camera crew. Since when did hot guys like this want me to go home with them? I laughed awkwardly, then chewed on my nails. Damn it. I was nervous, but I didn't want him to know that. No, I'm here for a birthday party. Of course, if I were honest with myself, no was the exact opposite of what I wanted to say. I would have loved to ditch the club and get out into the fresh, cool air. Somewhere quiet. But with this guy? The obvious answer was yes, I wanted to go outside with this guy. But he didn't fit here, and that was a big red flag for me. Along with my spidey senses screaming danger, of course. So thanks, fury. But I can't. His intense gaze locked onto mine. But you don't look like you're enjoying yourself, Meg. Wouldn't you rather get out of here and go somewhere quiet? Where you can hear yourself think? Where we can talk? A slow smile spread across his face and icy worry shivered through me. It was like he was reading my mind, and that in itself was scary. But in the best way. I was flattered that he was watching me and reading me so accurately. Few people did. I couldn't stop staring at him. He had high cheekbones, full lips, and eyes that sparkled like the ocean on a sunny day. I shook myself, focusing on the warning signals zinging through the parts of my body that weren't influenced by his beauty. Are you trying to get me alone, Fury? And what sort of name is that? He grinned and my knees buckled a little. Damn. I staggered, putting my hand against the wall, worried I was going to topple over. Are you all right? He asked, his eyebrows drawing together as he studied me. He put his hand on my elbow to stabilize me, but it had the opposite effect. Warmth spread from his touch, all the way up my arm and into my chest. I didn't pull away from him. I swallowed hard, forcing down a sudden lump in my throat. Yeah, I'm fine. I'm a klutz. Ignore me. You were saying? He stared at me, then his mouth kicked up on one side. Of course, I'm trying to get you alone. What guy wouldn't want to have a beautiful woman like you all to himself? It was such a good line, I had to smile up at him in recognition of his charm. Another warning chill coursed through my blood. My spidey senses again. Something my dad jokingly called my instincts were never wrong. This guy wasn't to be trusted, and yet I couldn't drag myself away from him. It was such a conundrum. I'd never been attracted to danger before. I looked toward the dance floor. I didn't want to send this guy packing, but I couldn't leave the club with him either. How about we dance instead? I suggested. It was the lesser of so many other evils. I wrapped my fingers around his bare forearm and dragged him into the fray of bouncing teenagers. If there was ever a man for whom to break through my comfort zone, it was this one. I glanced from one of the other guys' faces to Fiore's. Just to compare, to see if I was right about him not fitting into this underage crowd. I frowned. Fury actually didn't look older than the males around him. Instead, there was a wisdom to him that the others didn't have. An old soul, perhaps. His aura was different from everyone else in the room. I began to move to the pounding music, my stomach flip-flopping with nerves and awareness of fury. I had no rhythm, and if I managed to dance without falling over or flashing this guy, it would be a miracle. I attempted to lift my hands above my head and my skirt shifted, exposing my ass for the world to see. I pulled at the skirt, almost losing it in the opposite direction. I groaned aloud, then looked up into Fiore's delighted eyes. I didn't choose this outfit. He laughed openly this time. Really? So which part of all this? He asked, gesturing to my tight black skirt, heels and red strapless top that pushed my boobs together and up, isn't you? I groaned and rolled my eyes. All of it. But my friends told me I wasn't allowed to wear my usual jeans and jacket. Fury smiled and swayed with the music, the tension in my own body beginning to relax with his natural calm. I took a deep breath and allowed my clothes to do whatever the hell they wanted to do. I focused on him and followed his lead. He made dancing look easy, like he knew what he was doing, the movement natural for him it seemed. He leaned forward to talk to me over the noise, the heat of his breath on my face. You look beautiful. When he pulled back, I glanced down at his outfit. He wore fitted pants and a long-sleeved black button-down shirt with the cuffs rolled back. The combination made him stand out amongst everyone else, making him look both elegant and dangerous somehow. You didn't tell me where your name comes from. Is it Italian? I asked. He shrugged. It's a family name, but we're not Italian. What are you then? He didn't answer the question, instead countering with, What's Megara? I haven't heard it before. I rolled my eyes to the heavens, dancing a little closer so that I didn't have to strain so much to hear him or speak. It's something my mom made up, I said. She liked Megan and Sarah and Hannah, I think. She couldn't decide. So she just kind of threw them all together. But I don't mind Meg as a nickname. Well, Megara, Fury said, drawing out my name in the sexiest way I'd ever heard. I think someone as unique as you should have a name that's one of a kind too. I laughed this time, my face flushing with the heat of arousal and embarrassment. God, I wanted him. And part of me knew it was wrong to want this man. My hands ached to grab his shoulders and pull him close. To kiss those perfect lips and feel his strong body between my thighs. The attraction was so strong it was its own warning. I'd never felt this way before. Amazingly, it felt unnatural. I clung to the unease in my blood that knew that this guy was not what he seemed. You have all the lines, Fury. Aren't you a bit old to be hanging out with this crowd? I gestured to the teens around me, ranging from 16 to 20 years of age. He narrowed his eyes. I'm not yet 21. There was no way he was 20, but I would play along if that's what he wanted. For now. Whatever you say. I grinned. The music changed to a song I actually enjoyed, and I perked up. He stepped closer and I continued to wiggle my butt to the beat, throwing my hands up and moving around. I stepped away and he followed. I laughed when he continued to stalk me around the dance floor in a strange, sensual way. When he reached out to touch me, I spun away from him. Are you afraid of me, Megara? He asked, dropping his hand to his side. I shook my head. No, why would you ask that? My neck prickled, my warning system still on high alert. This guy was major trouble. But what kind of trouble was the question? He shrugged. You won't let me near you. I won't hurt you, you know. I frowned at him. How would I know that, Fury? I've never met you before. Fury opened his mouth as if to answer, then suddenly frowned and turned to glance over toward the club entrance, his lips tugging down as if with displeasure. I twisted to look in the same direction. Something wrong? I couldn't see anything strange, but then again, I didn't know what I was looking for. I'm being called away. He was? By who? I couldn't see anyone paying attention to us. But Fury grabbed my hand and lifted it up to his lips, capturing my full attention. He dropped a kiss to my knuckles. The skin on my hand tingled where his lips touched me, and my belly tugged deep and low with the attraction that burned between us. Stop it. I could see the regret on his face. I must go, Megara, but we will see each other again soon. As soon he let go of my fingers, I dropped my arm and ran my hands together, savoring both the tingle of awareness and the underlying prickle of unease. It was a heady combination. Almost like going on a roller coaster. The combination of danger and fear, overlaid with the thrill of excitement and a brand new experience. I smiled at him, strangely grateful to have met him. He'd certainly made my night a lot more interesting than it would have been with just me in the corner, by myself. Yes, I hope we do meet again. The chances were low, but I would love to feel this awesome mix of emotions again. He bowed his head and retreated into the crowd, disappearing from view far too quickly. I sighed, as the noise of the club crowded into my head once more. Normalcy achieved. Suddenly Holly was beside me, beaming with a huge smile. Who was that? I shrugged. Don't know. What do you mean, you don't know? Did you get his number? I shook my head. No. It wasn't like that. I hadn't even thought to ask. A warning tingle crossed my neck and I shivered. My premonitions were on fire tonight. I knew he was correct. We would see each other again, and soon. Chapter 3. I was swimming with sharks in a pool of pink jellyfish with bright blue eyes, like Fiore's. I gasped when the thought registered, and I found I could breathe beneath the water. Very cool. Then I was swimming for the surface, to a voice I recognized. Megara. Wake up, child. I swam out of the depths of sleep, and the weirdest dream I'd had in a long time, to hear my grandmother's voice. I tried to open my eyes, but they wouldn't cooperate. God, my head hurt. I hadn't had enough sleep. I rolled over without opening my eyes. I licked my lips and swallowed, trying to find my voice. This was one of my most favorite people in the world, and even though all I wanted to do was go back to sleep, I forced my voice to be friendly. Hi. Grandma. What are you doing here so early? Surely it couldn't be that long after sunrise. Darkness called, and I relaxed into the pillow. Just a few more hours. It's not early, child, she said. It's near noon. Come on, everyone wants you at the dining table. I nodded, and snuggled into my pillow. Cold air washed over my warm body as my grandmother pulled my blanket from my body and tossed it somewhere out of my reach. A trick my mother had used on me often through high school. She'd obviously learned it from her mother. I batted at the air, moaning. Stop. I'm getting up. I swung my legs over the bed and sat up, my eyes half open now. Grandma grinned at me as she moved to the door. See you in the dining room. Don't take too long or I'll be back. Then she vanished. I sighed and ran a hand through my tangled hair. I didn't even know what time we'd gotten in last night. After Fury left, I decided to throw caution to the wind and dance the night away with Holly. I didn't even worry about my undies showing. After all, we were only young and stupid once. I pushed myself to my feet and forced myself to the bathroom, cleaned my face with makeup remover, then scrubbed it with cold water, trying to wake up. When I ran my tongue over my teeth, they were furry and gross. Yuck. I put some toothpaste on the brush and scrubbed my teeth. I was halfway human now. Next were my clothes. I pulled on some soft, stretchy jeans and a hoodie from high school. My favorite. I glanced in the mirror and ran my hands through my ridiculously fluffy hair and pulled it up into a ponytail. I was ready to face the world. I trundled down the stairs to find my whole family gathered at the dining room table. I froze on the last step, worry hitting my gut like the proverbial lead balloon. There was no chatter going on, nor food spread out for a casual catch-up. They were waiting for me. Whoa, this looks like an intervention or something, I said. Not that I had anything to intervene against. I'd never even tried drugs, let alone gotten addicted to them. Alcohol. Never touched the stuff. Boys? Well, there'd been a few nights here and there during community college last year when I hadn't been the perfect daughter, but nothing to concern them, I was sure. So what was this about? I stretched out my back, a yawn surfacing despite my best efforts to smother it. I was still so tired. It was as if the few hours of sleep I'd gotten had not been good quality enough to register. What's going on? Come sit down, honey, my mom said, pushing out a chair next to her. I took a step forward, then groaned. Are you sure this can't wait, Mom? I'm still so tired from last night. I'm not sure I can give this conversation my complete attention. There was nothing worse than my parents wanting to have some big, deep and meaningful talk when I was still half asleep. We've let you sleep as long as possible, sweetie, Mom said. We're out of time. So please sit. We need to tell you something, and it can't wait. I fell into the chair and tried to ignore the feeling of dread in the pit of my stomach. When no one spoke, I scowled. You're scaring me. My mom looked at my dad, who stared back at her with that face he used sometimes. Like they were secretly communicating. I watched them, trying to figure out what they were talking about. What was I missing? They were obviously debating in that wordless way they had, deciding who was going to tell me the bad news. The worst part was I hadn't done anything wrong. Not that I could think of, anyway. If this is about school, you know I've been accepted to 3. I just can't choose yet. I'm not ready. I know you probably want me to accept one and move out, but... My mom turned to me. Meg, actually, this is about college and where you're going to be spending the rest of the year. I straightened up in my chair. Wait, what? You're sending me away. Where? My heart began to pound as panic reared its ugly head. I hadn't decided where I wanted to go to college yet, or even if I wanted to go at all, so how could they decide for me? And which of the pricey schools had they chosen? My mom slid her hand across the table, as though reaching out for me. This is a hard thing to say, Megara, so try to hear us out before you jump in, okay? Okay. That was going to be difficult, but I would try. They were all staring at me, all 3 of them. My stomach dropped with anxiety and tension, so I took a deep breath. There was no spidey sense sending out warning signals today, no hairs on my neck sticking up. Maybe this wasn't as bad as they were intimating. Then why is my stomach still doing flip-flops? My mom took a breath and noticeably steeled herself before saying, Megara, you will be attending the Slayer Academy this year. You leave this afternoon. The Slayer Academy? I tipped my head at her, trying to determine if I had understood correctly. What are you talking about? I've never heard of that college. They couldn't possibly be sending me away to some boarding school I'd never even seen, let alone heard of. Could they? Shocked tears tingled in my eyes as I stared at my parents. I was an only child. This house, these people, they were my whole life. I shook my head. I wasn't understanding this at all. Mom shuffled her chair closer and put her hand on my leg. At the Slayer Academy, you learn skills to hunt the Fae. We as a family have been hunting Fae for generations. It's our family legacy, and now it's your turn to honor the tradition. You're going to the academy to learn everything you need to know. I stared at my mother's face, then moved my gaze over to my father, hoping to see a glimmer of a smile. Something to indicate they were pulling my leg. This is a joke, right? I asked. My grandma reached out and squeezed my hand. No, sweetheart. We've kept you sheltered from this knowledge your whole life. But we knew the time was coming to tell you about it, and to send you to the academy to learn what you need. Skills to hunt the Fae. I stumbled over the last word. It sounded ridiculous. How had they hidden such a crazy detail from me? Surely they didn't mean it. But everyone at the table, everyone except me, was nodding. Yes, my grandma said. Your senses, they're attuned to the supernatural, are they not? I cocked my head on the side. But that's not real. It was a family joke, my spidey sense thing. It wasn't real, well, not like real. My grandma continued. Yes, it is. Your intuition, your ability to know when something bad is about to happen. The fact you don't really fit in with the other girls at your school. It means that you're special. You're a Slayer. And it's time you learn what that means. This conversation had just entered the twilight zone. I turned to my mom. Surely she'd talk sense. Mom, what are you guys talking about? A Slayer? As in I what? Kill people? I'd only ever read the term in books before. People didn't really say it out loud. No, you hunt the Fae. They aren't people. They're devils, my grandma answered instead of Mom, her tone a little too dark for my liking. I dragged my hands through my hair, pushing away the strands that had fallen forward off my face. I looked at my mom. But Mom, I don't want to go away to any school this year. I'd planned on staying home, working, maybe traveling a little. I'm not ready to move out, and definitely not to a place I've never even seen. I was panting and my chest hurt. I tried to control my breathing and tugged at my sleeves. Was I still asleep and dreaming? Because this was a nightmare come true. My parents were sending me away, without even asking me. And they were telling me I was some sort of, what? Natural-born hunter? That was the last thing in the world that I was. And what the hell is a Fae? Mom squeezed my hand. Sweetie, I did this too when I finished high school. I went to the same academy. So did your dad and your grandmother. And my mother. You'll be fine. Trust me. I looked my mother dead in the eyes. No. I'm not going, Mom. She smiled at me with that look I'd seen 100 times. Pain shot through my chest. I'd never won an argument with my mother, ever. And with a sinking feeling, I realized that today was not going to be any different. You have to go, darling. She patted my thigh. You leave at the end of the day. I'm going to drop you off myself. Luckily, there's no uniform now. When I was your age, there was this horrible tie and shirt thing. She took my hand and pulled me to my feet as she stood. Panic gripped my heart and tears dropped onto my cheeks. I swallowed hard, my throat closing. But Mom. Dad. I sniffed and wiped at my face as more tears fell and my nose began to drip. Dad waved at me as my mom ignored my panic attack and pulled me back up the stairs. I followed after her, unsure what to say or do to change her mind. Sweetie, you need to see this as a good thing. An adventure. She began pulling out my suitcase from the closet and my toiletry bag from the bathroom. I held up my hands. Mom, you need to slow down because you're scaring me. Is there something else going on? Are you and Dad fighting or something? They were trying to get rid of me, that was obvious. Making up some weird story about an academy I'd never heard of. If they'd both gone to the same college, wouldn't I have heard of it by now? Although I'd known they'd gone to school together, but somehow I'd never asked which one. Mom cupped my chin, but I didn't want her trying to smooth things over. I pulled away and dropped down onto the bed. She smiled at me, seeming unperturbed by my anger. No, my beautiful child. Your dad and I are fine. I'm sorry we didn't tell you sooner, but we wanted you to have a normal childhood. A normal childhood? What had been the alternative? So, you really are sending me away? Fresh tears sprung to my eyes, but this time I swallowed them back. I'd made so many plans for myself this year, and so few at the same time. I'd been looking forward to being able to do whatever I liked with my time. Not having the stress of exams, the tension of a schedule and everything on top of me. All the time. Megara. My mom sat next to me on the bed. The academy will be the place where you find out who you truly are, and how to hone the skills that only you have. I nodded, feeling overwhelmed and sad. My nose prickled, but I refused to keep crying. There was no point to it. Mom's mind was clearly made up. Mom continued? Didn't you wonder why you couldn't decide which school to attend? I looked at her. What did she mean by that? I was going to pick. She smiled again, that all-knowing grin that I'd seen my whole life. In truth, I couldn't understand what had stopped me choosing a college. Every time I thought about it, an uncomfortable feeling squeezed my chest as if someone was screaming the word no in my face. Whatever excuse you are about to give me is wrong, and deep down you know it, Megara. You're super clever. You could go anywhere and study anything. But you couldn't choose, could you? You didn't feel comfortable anywhere. And do you know why? She waited, letting the question hang in the air. I heaved out a sigh. No, Mom. Why? Because this school is your destiny. You just didn't know it. So now I'm going to pop downstairs and make some lunch while you have a shower and start packing. I'll be back soon to help you finish up. My mom squeezed my arm before disappearing downstairs. The tension cramping my stomach stayed with me, even after Mom had left. There was just me, a messy room and an empty suitcase. I looked around and didn't know whether to scream or start crying once again. Chapter 4. I didn't start packing. I couldn't. The world as I knew it had shifted on its axis, and I didn't know how to reconcile what I'd been told. I wanted to crawl under my comforter and never lift my head again. I felt so betrayed. There was a dark tightness in my chest, and I couldn't have formed a smile if someone had paid me. I lay down on my bed for a while, curled up in a ball, a sob caught in my throat. But I couldn't fall back to sleep. Obviously, this wasn't a dream. As I rolled onto my back, my hair fell across my face, and the scent of cigarettes and sweat from the club last night filled my nostrils. Mom was right. I needed a shower. I stripped down to my underwear and stalked across the hall to the bathroom. I'd always wanted an ensuite, but a bathroom all to myself was pretty good. A perk of being an only child. The colleges I had looked at boasted modern buildings and facilities, but what was the bet that this college would have cold dorm rooms filled with dozens of young adults and one community shower? I shuddered at the thought and frowned at my reflection in the mirror. What a mess. My eyes were red and puffy from a mixture of tiredness, crying and holding back the unshed tears I'd refused to let go. Was this really happening? I knew that being 19, I could actually just say no and refuse to go. But if I didn't do what my parents wanted, they might tell me I had to leave home for good. I wasn't ready to cut all ties with my family just yet. And on top of that need to stay connected with them, there was something underlying the whole situation that had a sense of inevitability about it. My instincts told me that everything they'd said at the dining table was the truth. And if I tried to buck against their wishes, it wouldn't go well for any of us. I couldn't explain why, or what might happen, but I knew that I needed to go along with this, no matter how much I wanted the opposite. For now at least. I sighed and shook my head. Keep moving. I stepped beneath the warm water and scrubbed my body and hair to remove the night's grease. Fiore's face swam into my mind every time I closed my eyes. Not disturbingly so. He didn't come to the forefront of my brain to make a conscious imprint, but instead he was just there. I didn't understand what had happened between us. I mean, nothing had actually happened, really. And yet it had. Somehow it had. What had last night been to him? For me, the whole experience had been unsettling, to say the least. I couldn't shake the idea that he was connected to this change that was happening today. The timing of him finding me last night and the sense of danger he brought with him was just too strange to be a coincidence. I finished my shower, enjoying the long moments of hot, uninterrupted water. Then I dried myself and pulled out fresh underwear. By the time I'd gotten back into my favorite jeans and hoodie, Grandma was in my room once again. This time though, her face held a tender smile. "How are you holding up, Meg?" I didn't answer right away, because I honestly didn't know how I was feeling. Instead of responding, I opened my closet and began rifling through my clothes. What to take? What to leave behind? I didn't have that many things that I truly loved, so I started with those items, tossing them onto the bed beside the suitcase Mom had left me. "Meg?" Grandma asked again, taking a seat on my bed, looking at me. "Okay, I guess." "I still can't believe this is actually happening, Grandma. I mean, not a single whisper about any of this has ever reached my ears. How come you guys sprung it on me at the last possible moment?" That was probably what rankled the most. Not the fact that they'd taken away all choice and told me where I would be going to college for the rest of the year. I was kind of used to that with my parents. But the rest of it was just so out of the blue. And so weird. They'd always made fun of my premonitions and strange abilities. Why hadn't they told me that it meant I was a Slayer? I still couldn't wrap my head around everything I'd been told. They'd lied to me, or at the very least, kept me from knowing a key part of myself and my heritage. "I feel a bit betrayed," I admitted. Grandma sat down on my bed and gave me a gentle pat on my arm. "We are sorry about that, Megara. But having more time to process the academy doesn't help. I knew what I was and where I was going for all of high school, and all it did was stop me from becoming attached to everyone around me. We didn't want that for you. Your mother and father asked my advice about when to tell you, and we all agreed we wanted you to have as normal a life as you could, for as long as you could. I frowned at her. But telling me today, right before I'm expected to leave? She grimaced. I know. We did leave it too long. Please believe me though, you will recover from the shock. You are stronger than you think. I turned to her, memorizing the creases of her face, the strength in her eyes. I had the strangest feeling that I would need to draw on this memory of her strength in the year to come. You really think so, Grandma? Because from where I'm sitting, I'm a kid who's barely out of high school, and I'm being kicked out of home, straight into a big bad world she never knew existed, with no skills at all to cope. As an only child, my parents had always sheltered and spoiled me. Not with material possessions, but with time cuddles. No chores and little responsibilities other than my studies. It was thanks to them that I'd had the time to spend with my books and my learning. I loved them for it, but I wasn't naive enough to think that book smarts were the same thing as street smarts. My grandma patted my hand. I'm sure you have questions, Megara. Ask me. I'll help you the best I can. I stood and began folding some shirts that I liked, placing them in the suitcase. A suitcase for a trip I hadn't known I'd be taking. I tried to feel something beyond shock and trepidation, but it felt like my body had locked everything else down. I was now in protection mode, it seemed. I don't even know where to begin, Grandma. It's all just so surreal. She nodded. Make sure you take lots of layers with you, and your thermal underwear. It gets cold there. I nodded, and grabbed my thermals from the snow gear section of my closet and obediently tucked them into my suitcase too. Where is this place? About 3 hours drive from here, so not far luckily. It's in the mountains. Hidden from view by spells that protect it from prying eyes. I stared at my grandma with my mouth hanging open. Spells? Are you serious? What does that make me? Some sort of witch? I'd often worried about my uncanny ability to read people, and know when a bad thing was about to happen. I'd always felt different, and slightly weird and embarrassed to admit it to my friends. But I hadn't put myself in the paranormal category. Or I hadn't, until now. No, you're not a witch exactly, but you do have powers that will be developed at the academy. Grandma was being vague on purpose, I could tell. But even so, a strange spark tickled my palms and I looked down at my hands. I couldn't see anything visible, but there was a zing of electricity beneath the skin. Was that excitement? I rubbed my palms together and tried to ignore it. I wasn't ready to acknowledge anything positive about being shunted off to a witchy academy. But for the first time since I'd entered the dining room and my life got turned on its head, the dark dread sitting on my shoulders began to lift. Will there be normal classes too? Oh yes. It's like any other college in that respect, she said. You have lots of electives or choice subjects. Maybe this will turn out okay then. I kept packing, pushing all my dresses and skirts to the back of my closet. They may have picked my college, but I would be responsible for what I took in the way of clothing. I pulled out my jeans, my black ones, my high-waisted blue ones, my ripped and shredded ones, and put them all in the suitcase. So you went to this place too, Grandma? I was beginning to relax. The more I talked, and strangely, the more I put into the suitcase, the more comfortable I felt about going. Yes, the people of our family have been going to the Slayer Academy for 5 generations now. My grandmother was the first in our family. I stopped packing to stare at her. Wow. That's a long time ago. And you all learned to be one of these Slayer people? Yes. She nodded. I grabbed my hairbrush and started entangling my wet hair. Slaying sounded very much like they expected me to fight, which was an impossibility for me. Surely they would know that. You know this sounds crazy, right, Grandma? Especially to me, who doesn't like confrontation. I've never even stood up to my own mother. And I'm 19 years old. Grandma laughed. Very few people can stand up to your mom, Meg. Even me. She's a formidable force. But she wasn't, when she first went to the academy. Neither was I. That was probably one of the only things that made sense in all of this. My mother had gone to a school that taught her how to be powerful. Don't worry, Meg. You'll flourish at this place. The same way your mother did. In theory, I liked the sound of that. But I was different than my mother. Very different. They don't expect me to fight? Like, physically fight, do they? I mean, that's not me at all. Grandma nodded. Yes, the Fae are our greatest enemy, and you will be taught how to defend yourself against them. How to kill them. Kill. I swiveled around. The Fae. What do you mean when you say Fae? As in fairies? As far as I knew, fairies weren't real, and if they were 3 inches tall and looked like Tinkerbell. My grandmother's mouth turned down. The Fae are very real, and are nothing like the fairies in the movies. They have killed humans since the beginning of time. They are evil monsters and they must be stopped. I was shocked by the amount of venom in my grandmother's words, but couldn't take any more in than I already had. My emotion and reaction banks were full. I shook my head. This is so confusing, Grandma. Seriously. Fae and fighting and slaying. Slay the Fae. Now that was a slogan for a t-shirt. I only just stopped the hysterical laughter from bubbling out. Grandma stood up and cupped my cheek. Sweetheart, it will all make sense soon, I promise. This is your destiny, and I need you to trust that you're on the right path. All right? I nodded silently. What could I say to that? None of my warning alerts were going off inside me. If anything, the excitement was growing. Something inside me knew. This was right. This was the change I'd been waiting for, something extraordinary that would come along and fill my life with purpose. All right, Grandma? She squeezed my hand and left the room. I was alone now with a half-packed suitcase, in a room I'd slept in my whole life, feeling disoriented and confused and unsure who I really was. As much as that deep-down part of me wanted this, the truth was I wasn't a fighter. Or a killer. How did they expect me to survive? Chapter 5. I kept packing until my suitcase was overflowing. I had to stuff my toiletries and pajamas into a backpack and overnight bag, because there was no room anywhere else. I had no idea how to pack for a 6-month stay, in a place I'd never been to before. Would they have stores if I ran out of personal stuff? Could Mom and Dad drive me up new clothes or tampons if I needed them and couldn't buy them locally? So many questions and no answers. When I was finally done packing, I shoved all the bags into the hallway and turned back to look at my room one more time. There were still clothes and shoes everywhere. It didn't look like I could have possibly taken anything. How could I, when there was so much still left? God, I hope I've packed enough. If I wasn't coming back for 6 months, I most certainly hadn't packed enough stuff. I'd left most of my winter wardrobe in my dresser. Hey Megara? Holly's sing-song voice floated up the stairs and she bounced up after it. Surprise rippled through me, followed by happiness. Holly. What are you doing here? I leaned forward to hug her and she kissed my cheeks. Your mom called and told me to get over here to say goodbye. I can't believe you're leaving. You didn't tell me. She gave me a mock outraged look and I rolled my eyes. This wasn't exactly my choice. My parents are shipping me off to some specialized college that Mom said they went to. Can I come? She asked, her bubbly personality pushing some warmth into my otherwise cold mood. I wish you could. It's kind of an invite-only, weird legacy family tradition thing. I didn't know how best to explain it to Holly. After all, I didn't know enough myself. And even if I did, I had the feeling that people like Holly were not allowed to know about it. Holly. Meg. I've put a late lunch on the table. Come eat. That was Grandma feeding me one last time. Shall we? I suggested, my stomach rumbling. I hadn't eaten since last night, But with all the shock and stress, I hadn't really noticed how hungry my body was until that moment. Yeah, why not? I love your grandma's food. Holly bounced down the stairs, and I dragged after her to the table. You all packed, sweetie? Mom asked as she dished out the fried chicken and potato salad. One of my favorite meals. The smell of the food and the warmth in the room made it hard to stay mad at my family. Yeah, I think so. Please tell me I'm coming home for Christmas though, because I'll need to change over my wardrobe. Gonna buy more jeans? Dad asked, and everyone around the table laughed. Except me, though I have to admit he did get a smile from me for that one. Where is this place, Mrs. Cassicos? Holly asked as she grabbed for the chicken. Out of state, Holly. In a little, known town you wouldn't have heard of. Here, have some potato salad to go with that. My mom shoved the salad bowl at her. Yep, I was right. This college was not for the Hollies of this world. My grandma served some chicken onto my plate and gave me a look that said, eat. My fickle appetite had deserted me again, no doubt nerves about the upcoming trip. But to appease my grandma, I picked up the piece of chicken and played with the skin. Crispy and brown and super oily, just how I liked it. Holly spun around and whacked me in the arm. Oh? Are you going to tell me more about what happened with that guy last night, Meg? Oh. I looked at my mom, then my dad. I didn't really talk about guys with my parents. Nothing to tell, really? We just chatted for a few minutes and then he left. Holly gushed and sighed. He was so good looking. I couldn't believe it when I saw you dancing with him. I mean, you never dance. But who could blame you when a guy like that wanted to be with you? I stuck the chicken between my teeth and tore off a piece before chewing determinedly. Hopefully Holly would understand my not-so-subtle hint and change the subject. I wasn't quite that lucky. I looked up as silence descended around the table. Everyone was staring at me expectantly. You were dancing, Meg. That's not like you at all, Mom said, her eyes bright with interest. I shrugged and took a sip of my water. Move along, people. Come on, tell us about this boy you met, Mom said, then took a bite of her potato salad. They all waited, and I kept eating, trying not to meet anyone's eyes. It wasn't a big deal, I muttered. Holly practically bounced on the chair. It totally was. He was so hot. All mysterious and older. I turned to glare at her, but she simply shrugged unapologetically. I hope he wasn't one of those older men trying to pick up a girl under drinking age, my dad said, a scowl on his face. I rolled my eyes. Fine. His name was Fury, and he said he was 20. He was all intense and wanted me to leave with him, which of course I didn't. Holly leaned over her plate toward me. Oh, you didn't tell me that part? How cool. My mom and grandma exchanged worried looks. Hot weighted stress hit my gut, just as it had the night before. What's wrong, Mom? Oh, nothing, Mom said, nudging the plate of chicken toward my father. He sounds like an unusual, young man. My senses tingled with foreboding. I opened my mouth to ask more, but Grandma cleared her throat and shook her head, gesturing surreptitiously as if to remind me of Holly's presence. Clearly, it was time to change the subject. Anyway, I won't be seeing him again now that I'm moving away. Tell Mom and Dad about your plans for the year, Holly. My bubbly friend flew into a song and dance about the school she'd gotten into. A small local one that sounded like it would be party central. She provided a nice buffer for my stretched nerves, and it was good to laugh with her one last time. After lunch was finished and cleared away, Mom stood up and said, "It's time to go, Meg. We have a bit of a drive, so better say your goodbyes to Holly." My breath shuddered and my stomach tightened. This was really happening. Holly wrapped her arms around me and squeezed tightly. FaceTime me, message me, email me, I don't care. Just keep in touch. I'm going to miss you so much. I hugged her back and closed my eyes, breathing in the flowery scent of my most trusted friend. I'm gonna miss you too, Holly. We've been preparing for this break for years. I'd always known Holly wouldn't make the grades to get into an elite school, and she'd always known I would. But it still hurt, and my heart ached to leave behind a true friend. She finally pulled away, laughing as she wiped at the tears on her face. "I'll see you guys soon, I guess." She kissed my parents goodbye and left, the sound of her soft sniffling following her all the way to her car. Dad went upstairs and grabbed my bags. "Is this everything?" He threw down my backpack and I picked it up. It didn't look like enough. "Yep. I think so," I said. "Time to go then." Grandma grabbed me up for a tight squeeze. I closed my eyes and hugged her back. "I'll miss you, Grandma." She laughed and squeezed tighter. "You just go be yourself, beautiful girl. You'll be fine." I pulled away from her and followed my parents out into the sunshine. As we walked toward my uncertain future, my head filled up with questions. Will I need money or anything while I'm there? Food? How does it all work? Did they have banks? Or account cards like a cruise ship? Mom smiled. "Hop in and I'll explain it all on the way." Chapter 6. Dad said he had to do a night shift at his local job, so Mom was going to be the one to drive me all the way to the Slayer Academy. After a tearful goodbye on my end, my dad waved and walked back into the house. "It's not really out of state, is it, Mom?" I asked as I slid into the car, and we headed in the direction of my new college. Worst surprise ever. I wiped my nose and blinked back the tears that formed. I was going to miss my grandma more than anyone. She was funny and kind, and so peaceful to be around. When I couldn't handle anyone else, my grandma was my rock. "No, it's only a few hours away." I just wanted to stop Holly from asking so many questions. I understood that, but now I was confused about which of the things she'd said were right and which ones weren't. "Speaking of questions, Mom, tell me how it all works. What's going to happen to me at this place?" Mom kept her eyes on the road while she spoke. "In most ways, it's like any other college. The fees your father and I have paid covers tuition, all meals at the general food halls, and board. You won't have a car, but that won't matter as there's nowhere really to go off campus, but we'll put some money in your account in case something comes up." I had money saved up from working odd jobs through high school, but it was nice to know I could leave that for the Christmas holidays. "Thanks," I said, trying to keep my tone happy and light, but considering they were forcing me into this, I suppose they needed to cover me for all eventualities. "Have you heard of scrying, Megara?" My mom only used my full name when I was in trouble, or when she was being super serious about something. I was pretty sure I wasn't in trouble, so I tried to zone in on what she was saying and concentrate. "No. What is it?" "Your grandmother and I believe that's your gift. It's another word for seeing, being able to look into the future. To stare into a suitable medium, such as a body of water or a mirror for example, and see something that hasn't yet come to pass. But your skill is even stronger than that. You can sense when things are going to happen, without needing anything like a mirror for support." I glanced across at her. "That's not a real thing, is it? I mean, I've always been able to guess stuff and be right. But that doesn't mean I can see the future. Or that it's an actual gift or something. I was pretty sure a lot of other people could do that, too. I couldn't be that special." She laughed. "That's not considered a normal skill set, sweetheart? You definitely have a gift, and the academy will teach you how to hone that skill to become a powerful weapon." I grunted and looked out the window. I didn't know what to believe anymore. This was all too crazy. There was silence in the car for a while, so I watched my hometown disappear behind us in the side mirror. Eventually, Mom cleared her throat. "I need to warn you." "Oh, here we go." "Yeah? About what?" "Mysterious, handsome strangers." That got my attention and made my stomach clench. "What do you mean? Like the boys at this new school?" Was she sending me to a place where I would have to fight off the guys in my class? Were they going to be some sort of super, irresistible type of guy, Like fury? He kept creeping into my thoughts, no matter how hard I tried to avoid it. Mom gripped the steering wheel tighter, her knuckles going white. No, more like this fury you spoke about from last night. Everyone at the academy will have been vetted, and the students are usually the children or grandchildren of older slayers. But if you meet a man who feels as alluring as he is dangerous, then you need to stay on your guard. I shivered as her warning settled over me. Why, Mom? I'd felt that way with Fury last night, like he was strangely bad for me. But my fear hadn't really made sense at the time, especially with my inability to stay away from him. If he hadn't chosen to leave when he had, I couldn't say what I would have done by the end of the night under the spell of his charm. They'll explain everything at the college, Meg. Just be careful. Please. Be careful of dangerous, good-looking charming guys. Done. I laughed, a little hysterically. I don't know why my mom was so worried. As if those sorts of guys ever went for me. Then again, Fury had surprised me last night. Perhaps my luck was changing. Finally, we turned off the main road onto a gravel side track, arriving at an estate barred by an old iron gate. Is this it? Yes, you should be able to see the academy very soon. I peered out the window at the college grounds as the iron gates slid open and we passed through. We drove up to an old building with an intimidating air. It looked like a castle from the medieval era, with corner turrets finishing in pointed terrace tops around 3 stories high. It was wide and probably 3 times as deep. Nothing about the exterior was friendly. It looked as if it was made of a mixture of iron and blue stone, with formal stained glass windows that reminded me of a church. Do they want to scare all the strangers away? Mom laughed. Yeah, kind of. I opened the car door and stood up, shaking out the tiredness from my cramped legs before staring up at the imposing building. Well, slap me stupid, but this was a totally shitty idea. I glanced back at the car and my mom hadn't moved. Why hadn't she gotten out? You coming, Mom? Surely, she was going to help me unpack and embarrass me in front of my new roommates. She was good at all that mom stuff. She shook her head. No, I'm not allowed to. We have to say goodbye here. Despite the residual anger about being forced into this place, I dove back into the car and wrapped my arms around her. I'm not ready for this, Mom. We're saying goodbye too soon. My mom kissed my cheek and my eyes tingled with tears. She'd stuck by me through every bad day, heartbreak and exam. To do college life without her nearby seemed wrong. You are going to be amazing, my beautiful daughter, she whispered into my ear as she stroked my hair. I'm just sorry we didn't tell you earlier about this side of our lives. Yeah. Me too. I squeezed my eyes shut and hung on for dear life. This wasn't how my life was supposed to go. I held her until the tears stopped flowing down my cheeks, and eventually we both pulled back, emotionally exhausted and snotty-nosed. I grabbed for the tissue box she always kept in the back seat and blew my nose. I suppose I have to carry all my own bags up to the room too? I joked as I straightened and took a deep breath. Mom hiccuped and laughed as she dabbed at her face too. Yeah. You know, you're an adult now. Yeah. Old enough to drive, too young to drink, I quipped. America had the weirdest laws ever. You know, in Australia the legal drinking and driving age is 18. Mom laughed. Yeah, but they're the land down under for a reason. Nothing makes sense about them. I managed to laugh at that one. So true. Yeah. Mom reached out and stroked my cheek with her fingers. You can call me whenever you want, I think, though the phone reception was always terrible in this region. Even when we only had landlines. I nodded, and took another deep breath. I couldn't sit in the car all night. I had to move. Okay. Well, I better get inside then. It was growing dark, and I didn't really like the idea of trying to settle in at night. You're right. Good luck, Meg. I love you. So much. I grabbed her hand and squeezed. I love you too. I took one more lingering look at my mother and heaved a sigh. Time to go. I climbed out and there was a loud click as Mom popped the trunk for me. Really? She couldn't even get out of the car to help me? That sounded like a stupid rule to me. I pulled out my heavy suitcase, then slid the backpack onto my shoulders. Glad I didn't pack more. I yelled at Mom before I closed the trunk again. I heard her laugh for one more second. One blissful more second. Then I grabbed the handle of my suitcase and Mom took off, back down the gravel road. My heart ached to see her go. I'd never even been to summer camp, nor on any vacation without her. And I'd never thought of that as a bad thing, until now. I suddenly realized I was terribly ill, equipped for this new adventure. A Slayer Academy. Presumably full of fierce warrior types, and here I was, sniffling because I was being left alone for the first time. You're an adult, I reminded myself and straightened my shoulders. You can do this. I walked forward, toward the closed front doors of the monstrous building, studying the smooth walls in front of me. How did I even get inside? There was a sudden flurry of movement around me, and several people appeared from the surrounding bushes, circling me like hunters stalking prey. My stomach tightened and my senses screamed out in warning. Too late. Fuck. I was in trouble here. 3 boys and a girl circled me. They grimaced as they looked me up and down, as though they were assessing me. What have we got here? A boy with spiky dark hair spoke. A new girl. My neck tingled with an intense warning. I gripped the handle on my suitcase harder, my hands shaking. I didn't have anything for them to steal, so what did they want? The girl pulled a sword from nowhere and pointed it at me. Holy shit. Something really bad was about to happen, and I didn't need my spidey senses to tell me that. I cleared my throat. Surely, I could talk myself out of this one. Hey, The girl lifted the sword and swung it at my face in a move so fast she was almost a blur. I dropped my suitcase and only just managed to jump back out of reach as the metal blade sliced past my skin with only a hair to spare. What the hell? You're got a bit of speed, the spiky-haired boy said with a grudging tone. But not enough. They all moved then, and I automatically lifted my hands as they came at me, kicking and swinging their fists in a threatening way. They didn't actually connect, but the threat was there, and I had to dodge and weave out of their way. I noticed an older-looking guy lingering in the background, watching. But he wasn't stepping forward to help. I glanced over at him, to appeal to him, but he looked like he was waiting for me to do something. Anger grew in my gut. Anger at him and at these bullies. I had to fight back, but I hadn't even entered the academy building yet, let alone been taught how to fight. Pain suddenly splintered across my ribs as the girl launched forward and landed a blow with her fist. Ow! Then they were all on me, and all I could do was bar my teeth and growl as I tried unsuccessfully to block their punches. But I'd never been in a fight in my whole life, and there were 4 of them against 1. When there was a break in the onslaught, I turned and bolted away from the group, fueled by terror and rage. My feet slid in the mud as I reached the trees and came to a halt, looking back and forth for an escape route. But there was nowhere to go, only more trees, shadows and darkness ahead, the forbidding wall of the academy building to one side, and everywhere else, boys and the girl pursuing me. I turned to face them, my heart pounding. What the hell do you want? The older guy in the background kept watching as the others stalked me. I directed my gaze at him. And what is your problem? You enjoy watching someone get bullied and beaten up? He showed no emotion, only crossed his arms over his chest and studied me. You're an asshole, I yelled before dismissing him and turning back to face the group. All of you are complete and utter assholes. They had stopped a short distance away. One of the guys called out, "Here," and threw me a sword. Somehow, I caught it by the handle, God knew how, and held it up to defend myself. I had no idea how to use the thing, but as the chick came at me, her blonde ponytail swinging merrily behind her, I had to figure it out pretty damn quickly. She grinned, her symmetrical face making me grimace. This girl might be pretty on the outside, but she was enjoying my fear. Feeding off it. Clearly, she was anything but pretty on the inside. She swung her huge sword in an arc. I gasped, and held up my weapon to block it. The metal blades connected with a clang, and pain vibrated up my arms. This was utterly ridiculous. I cried out and dropped the sword. My heart pounded with adrenaline, and I turned again to run. One of the guys blocked my path, his huge chest and arms all the intimidation I needed to freeze in place. I peered up at him, strands of hair in my vision. "What do you want? Please stop this." He dove at me, as if I hadn't spoken at all. I twirled around, ducking away before he could hit me. But the damn smiling girl was there with the sword again. I was so dead. I took a step back from her. A guy behind me grabbed my arms and pulled them tight up my back. I struggled in his grip, and swallowed the sob that rose into my throat at the wrench in my shoulders. I tried using the guy's hold as leverage and kicking out at the girl when she came forward, but that only made the ache in my arms worse. I let out a shriek that was equal thirds pain, fear and rage. This was insane. These people were insane. As soon as I was able, I would call my parents and head home. If this was how they welcomed newcomers to this place, Slayer Academy was not the college for me. The blonde girl held the sword out and pressed the pointy end against my throat, the cold hard tip flicking along my skin. Hot tears burned my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Why were they doing this? I lifted my chin. "You crazy bitch," I said, wondering if I was just as crazy for antagonizing her. But something deep inside me would not let her break me. I hated this girl, and we hadn't even officially met. She blinked, as if I'd surprised her a little. "Go on then. Do it," I dared, while the voice in my head screamed at me to shut up. "Plead with her. Beg for your life. Don't dare her to kill you with a sword." One of the boys let out a faint chuckle. "Maybe the spiky-haired one?" I couldn't risk taking my eyes off the girl and the sword against my throat. I don't know who you think I am," I said. "Or what I've done, but..." She raised the sword above her head, and took a powerful stance, as if she was about to kill me. Fear raced through my blood, and I couldn't contain the tremble in my limbs. I'd done it now. I dared her to kill me. And she was about to follow through. I closed my eyes and prayed for a miracle. Someone save me. Chapter 7. I waited, but nothing happened. When I dared to open my eyes, the girl and her bully companions were backing away. "You're pathetic," the girl spat at me. The big guy behind me released my arms and I stumbled forward, falling onto the gravel. I managed to rock back onto my haunches and wipe my hands on my jeans. When I lifted my head, they were all staring down at me. I glared at them all in turn, wishing I had the skills to have fought instead of being beaten, literally, to the ground. The girl sheathed her sword and sauntered away, shaking her head, followed by the other boys. The older guy who'd been hanging back watching from a distance strolled over, his shoulder-length blonde hair glinting despite the lengthening shadows of evening. "Hey," he said as he offered me a hand. I stared at him for a minute, judging his intent and tapping into my spidey senses. He had hard eyes, but he didn't seem like he wanted to kill me. The warning prickles against my skin were gone. This one wasn't going to hurt me, at least for now. But that didn't make him any less dangerous. I wasn't going to be the one to turn away some help though, since I was sitting in the dirt. I took his hand and allowed him to pull me to my feet, my whole body still quaking with adrenaline. "You enjoy watching bullies beat people up? You asshole." At his silence and raised eyebrow, I grimaced and ignored him, limping over to where my suitcase had fallen on its side. Considering what had just happened, I wasn't that hurt. They hadn't drawn blood, and although I was bruised, they'd obviously been pulling their punches. The guy was still there when I turned around. He was scruffy around the edges but tall, with a calm blue aura. My mind instantly went to fury, wondering if he would have stood by and watched me get beaten up the way this guy had. Finally, he spoke. "I have to say, I'm a bit surprised. We all are. His tone was gentle, but I could hear the intelligence and strength behind his words. Why's that? I asked, lifting up my suitcase and turning toward the only door I could see in the building. The others had headed in that way, so I would too. What a great fucking start to my college days. Called pathetic and almost killed. Yeah, my kids were going to love this story if I stayed alive long enough to have any. Well, you're a legacy, he said. You're a Callum, right? I stopped and looked back at him. How did he know that? That's my mom's maiden name. What do you mean, a legacy? He laughed. You don't know much, do you? I shook my head and tightened my lips. I knew next to nothing, and it was frustrating as hell. I found out about this place this morning. His brows rose. Your mom's a legend around here, same as your grandmother. Your whole family, really. I stared at him. What on earth are you talking about? He grinned, and my simmering anger began to grow. I was starting to feel like I'd been set up by those closest to me. The attitude of this smug asshole was simply the icing on the cake. He continued. Since the first graduates of the academy, your family has always been among the best slayers the school ever produced. Everyone assumed you'd be the same, and yet you don't even know how to defend yourself. I sighed loudly. Seriously? Now, I was expected to be the best out of everyone else. Well, son of a fucking bitch. It was starting to look like Mom, Dad and Grandma may have left a few things out when they explained the Slayer Academy to me. A few important things. I had no idea what a Slayer was, or that I would be attending this school, until a few hours ago. I've never been taught to defend myself or fight. I've never had the need. Till now. So, try not to be too disappointed in me, okay? I don't know jack shit about this place. I glared at him, daring him to say another stupid thing. He put his hands up. Hey, don't get your shorts in a twist. You aren't special, you know. Everyone gets challenged when they first step onto the grounds. Be grateful I gave you a girl to fight with. I blew my hair out of my face and rolled my eyes. Okay, well, how about you show me where the main office is or whatever you call it in this damn place? And I'll arrange to get myself picked up and taken home. Name's Brutus. Of course it is. Brutus the bully. Just perfect. I pulled my cell phone out of my pocket and checked the screen. There was no reception. Shit. Of course I can't even use my fucking cell phone. My anger was at a level that I wished the chick with the sword would come back so we could do that scene again. I might do better now. Brutus gave me a lopsided smile. You won't get much coverage anywhere here. You won't need it. This way, Legacy? He strode up the stairs to what was clearly the main entrance and pushed open the massive front door. I pulled my suitcase behind me and followed along, seething with so many emotions I didn't know how to process them. Once we were inside, I could see the whole place was massive. Even the entrance corridor had 20-foot ceilings, intricate cornicing and beautiful timber floors. I could only imagine what the more important rooms would look like. Here it is, Brutus said as he stopped walking. He pointed to a large wooden door with the silver letters, Dean, embossed on it. I'll see you around. He winked, making himself look playful and stupid all at once, then strode off. I watched him go, and even though I still detested him, I could see he actually had a pretty nice body. Great ass. Not as good as Fiore's. I groaned aloud at my thoughts. Stupid freaking hormones. I shook myself out of my daydream and knocked on the door in front of me. I wasn't meant to be here, and I had to get this mistake sorted out and fast. Before someone else attacked me. The door opened and a man in his 50s with a receding hairline and glasses answered the door. The perfect nerd. Exactly what I expected a dean to look like. But as I stood in his presence for a few seconds, my skin tingled. I recognized a strength to this person I didn't often find with people. This man was not to be underestimated, and I would do well to remember that. Hello, I began. I'm Megara Casikos and I'd like to call my mother, please. There's been some mistake. I don't belong here and I need to go home. He smiled gently. There's been no mistake, Megara. You've been enrolled in the Slayer Academy since birth. He glanced down at my disheveled appearance. Though it looks like some of our students have given you a rough introduction to the college. My apologies. He stepped into the corridor, shut the door to his office and gestured behind me. Allow me to show you around the grounds, he said. Then we can chat about what happens next. Let me help you with your luggage. He took the suitcase handle from my grasp and began pulling it along the corridor. I scrabbled after him, his long legs setting a fast pace. Hadn't he heard me? I wanted to go home. The academy is spread out into 4 different buildings within the central walls, he said. The dorms are divided. One for the girls, one for the boys, of course. Building A is for all academic classes and Building C includes the mess halls and the practical classrooms. We have extensive training areas for physical activity to the north of Building C, as well. It all sounded very impressive. That's great. But the forest beyond the academy grounds is out of bounds beyond the west line, he said, as if I hadn't spoken at all. Right. I still wasn't staying. We have grand traditions at the academy. This guy wasn't letting my desire to go home penetrate or stop him speaking. We've protected the human population from the Fae for hundreds of years, Megara? Longer, if some of the elders are to be believed. That piqued my curiosity. He strode ahead, and I hurried to catch up with him. I'm not sure if my parents told you this, but I'd never even heard the word Fae before this morning. He smiled at me as we walked. Yes, your parents did mention something like that. Don't worry. You're not alone in your ignorance. That's what you're here for. To learn. Surely, he understood why I wanted to go home. Don't you think that's kind of weird? I mean, isn't that something I should have been prepared for earlier? He chuckled. Megara, I'm sure you've always known that there was something special about you, even if you couldn't put your finger on it. I didn't really like the phrasing, but yes. Well, not special exactly, but different. I'd known that there was something weird about me ever since I was little. I groaned aloud. That explained all of those great pep talks my parents always gave me about how quirky, cool, and strong I was. I'd thought they were just being supportive parents. The dean continued, as though my qualms were nothing out of the ordinary. The Fae are immortals that live thousands of years. They have great magic, and take pleasure in hunting and killing humans. That didn't sound like any fairies I'd read about. Why would they do that? He shrugged. We don't really know. There are many schools of thought on the topic. That they are driven purely by evil is the main belief. Others believe it is the Fae envy of our mortality, our pleasure with life, that they crave. But in the end, there is only one thing I believe, and that is the killing of humans must be stopped. And our academy equips the Slayers to do that. I made a hymn sound as though I agreed with him, but truth be told, he wasn't making a whole lot of sense to me. If my family had been fighting these Fae for generations, then obviously they couldn't be good creatures. But I needed a better reason than a nebulous, we think they're pure evil, to hunt a whole race of beings to death. This wing has the food halls, the dean said as he gestured down a hallway. Then he turned away. And this direction for the female accommodations. As I looked around the rooms and through various windows outside to the incredible gardens and courtyard, I began to relax. The urge to go home was still there, but for the first time since I'd arrived, I felt a sense of calm descend. This place was familiar to me in a strange, dream-like way. Almost comforting. How was that possible? The grounds and the building, I had to admit, were beautiful. The carved fireplaces in the common areas, the sprawling space around us as we walked. Thank you so much for the tour, but I'd still like to go home. I really think there's been a mistake. I'm not a fighter or a slayer. There was less conviction in my tone this time. Even I could hear it. He gave me an indulgent smile. There's no mistake, Megara. As I told you, you were born for this place. Born to be a slayer of the Fae. I glanced around. Did he really say that? Did anyone else hear him? And did he know how crazy he sounded? Can you call my mom and just tell her what I said, please? My cell phone doesn't have any service out here. Which was crazy scary. I didn't know anywhere that didn't have at least one bar. The dean smiled and stopped at a large door with the number 16 on it. There isn't any cell coverage for miles around. This is your suite. Please go inside and meet your roommates and settle in. He set my luggage next to the door and knocked hard on the wood. But he turned away as though dismissing me. Good luck, Megara. Then he seemed to think better of it, and turned back to me with a small frown. I want to apologize for the way the other students greeted you at the front steps. I believe it would have been Brutus and the others. It's their way of finding out who has been trained and who hasn't. They were probably harder on you, given the expectations of anyone born into your family, but still, I'm sorry for that. Great. I scowled at him, not caring that I was speaking to the man who ran the whole place. If he knew about their bully gang, why hadn't he stopped them before now? I was attacked. With a sword. They should be expelled at the very least. All of them. Something like that would never have happened at my old school. He didn't flinch. We are the Slayer Academy, Megara. We do things quite differently here, but you'll soon learn our ways. Before I could respond further, he walked away. My heart sank. No one was going to help me get out of here. I was stuck. For now at least. Oh hey. A girl with spiral orange hair opened the door, her energetic aura causing my mood to lift immediately. She pushed the door further back so I could see inside the room. It was much bigger than I had thought it would be, with good lighting and drapes over a massive window. The dean had said suite, and he obviously meant it. There were another 2 girls in the room too, sitting on their beds. 4 of us in one room? Yes, it was big, but I had grown up as an only child. Oh. My God. There wasn't even 4 people in my entire house at one time. This was going to be intense. I took a deep breath and let it out in one shuddering release of stress. Hi. I'm Megara, I said, realizing they were all waiting for me to speak. I was going to have to break the ice somehow. The legacy. Yeah, come on in. Orange Spirals waved me in, and pointed to the only wall that wasn't already covered in posters and female paraphernalia. That's your corner. We're all pretty much set up now. I looked around the room. All 4 beds were identical in size and space allocated. Seemed fair enough. Oddly enough, the bed she pointed to, the only spare, was the one I would have chosen, closest to the window and with direct sight to the door. I hauled my suitcase into the room, and headed for the space that was going to be my home for a while, it seemed. Unless I could find a way to get in contact with my mom. She would come get me surely. An image of her driving away flashed before my eyes. She hadn't even gotten out of the car. I sighed again, that strange intuitive part of me realizing that I did not have a choice about whether to stay here or not. What's mine? I asked, nodding toward the closet and drawers. A dark-haired girl on the bed closest to mine stood up and pointed. Those 4 drawers we left for you, and there's a little hanging space left. That seemed good enough for now, and I could always leave stuff in my suitcase and shove it under my bed for storage. Thanks. I dropped my backpack onto the bed and opened the suitcase. May as well put away a few things. I'm Tabby, by the way. The girl who spoke was the orange-haired one who'd opened the door. She was now sprawled on her stomach, reading a magazine. Her smile said she was down to earth. My kind of girl. Which was nice, and made me feel like it was possible that I could make a friend in her quickly. I faced the 3 girls, all of whom were looking at me expectantly. Steph, the dark-haired girl with headphones around her neck said with a wave and a grin. She wore brightly colored, off-beat clothing, and I knew instantly that I would become a complete wallflower around her. The third girl was thin, with glasses and strawberry blonde hair. She was peering up over the book she had obviously been reading. "I'm Katie." Warmth filtered across my skin and spread into my chest. My spidey senses liked her. There was a soul sister there. Katie would be smart and sweet. Perfect. But I was getting ahead of myself now. What happened to wanting to go home? "It's nice to meet you all," I said. I pulled my jeans out of my suitcase and placed them all in one drawer, tops in another and my underwear in a third drawer. I assessed my clothes, hoping my mom had been right about one thing. "So there's no uniform, right? We can just wear what we want?" "Yeah, pretty much," Tabby said. I would take that as a positive. Once I'd unpacked, I sat on my bed and looked around. "Have you guys eaten? How do meals work around here?" Night had fallen, and they'd probably be heading off to dinner soon. But to be honest, I had no appetite for dinner. Katie smiled at me over her book. "Dinner's in an hour or so. Are you going to come with us? The food's not bad, considering it's bulk prepared." I smiled back at her, my whole body calming with her voice. That was generally how I'd chosen my friends in the past. My body reacted to them and their aura, and I listened to my instinct. I had a good feeling about Katie. And the other two, for that matter. No warning tingles in this room. None at all, which was comforting and unusual. I rarely went anywhere among people without having some sort of internal alarm clanging. Amazing. "Good to know, but I think I'll just unpack and head to bed early," I said. This has been one of the strangest days of my life. Tabby sat up and pulled her legs beneath her, curling up like a cat. "Is it true that you didn't even know about the academy before today?" I glanced over at her. "Mom always said good news traveled fast, bad news even faster." "Who told you that?" Tabby shrugged. "It's already getting around that you're not the fierce Callum heir that everyone was expecting." Unfortunately, I'd heard that one too many times today. Being an underachiever in my family had always had its pitfalls. My lips tightened and I crossed my arms over my chest. "Story of my life?" "Sorry." Tabby looked slightly apologetic. "Don't be. It is what it is. I found out about the Academy and Fae and Slayers just this morning." "A lot to process," Katie said softly, and I gave her a grateful smile. "Yeah. And now I was in a strange, dangerous world with swords and bullies and high expectations. I had to find a way to get home. Surely this had to be some sort of elaborate prank, because I did not belong here. Not one bit." Chapter 8. The mattress was soft and comfortable, and the warmth in the room overnight was actually nice. 4 people sharing one room had its benefits. "Hey Megara. We need to get to breakfast. Classes start in 20 minutes. I hadn't opened my eyes yet, but I was pretty sure that was Tabby. Too bright and bubbly by half. Our room's personal alarm clock. 20 minutes was not long enough to be presentable. Oh shit. I groaned and threw off the blankets. I needed much more sleep than this, and it was doubly hard to crawl out of bed when it was warm beneath the covers, and too cold in the room. I didn't open my eyes. "Time's running out, Megara," Tabby said. Someone flicked on the main light overhead, and white brightness blasted me even from behind my eyelids. "Okay. And it's Meg." I managed to sit up, and then shivered in the cold air. So it wasn't actually warm in the room, just like Grandma had said. It must have been the auras of the girls that kept me happy overnight. That was reassuring. There was no snake in this little Garden of Eden. I raced to the bathroom to wash and brush my hair, then pulled on a pair of clean black jeans, a light sweater and my leather boots. "They look comfortable," Tabby said, sidling up next to me and staring down at my shoes. "Yeah, I like things that keep me warm." And you can run in them, I assume? I looked down again, noticing that her shoes were not designed for comfort or running. Then back at mine. Ah, yeah. I suppose. I've never really thought about that. Never had to, in the past. I hadn't needed to worry about anything except comfort. But I suppose, considering what happened yesterday, that's probably my new reason for shoe choice. Come to think of it, I should have packed more sneakers. I had a closet full. At home. Tabby laughed good-naturedly. Yeah, I heard about your little run-in with Brutus's pack. Sounds like you have a lot to learn. I slapped my hand to my forehead. I did have a lot to learn about this world, but I didn't really love people rubbing my nose in it every time I turned around. Grab a bag and some books, pens, whatever you've brought with you. Tabby gestured to her shoulder bag, and I noticed that everyone else was equipped with their school stuff. Oh yeah, hang on. I pulled out my suitcase from underneath my bed, and grabbed the small leather satchel bag that Mom had given me for my last birthday. I'd thrown it in last minute. I didn't really bring stationery stuff, I said. Here you go, Katie said, standing next to me with a notebook and pen in hand. I stared up at her, the warmth of her aura showering me with sunshine. Thanks a million. She smiled and I took her gift and put it into my bag. Wow, that was nice of her. I joined the others, and we headed out the door, then turned into a corridor I didn't recognize. The others were sure of their way and pulled ahead. I hurried to catch up, trying not to get lost. I had no idea where I was going. I'd been kind of shell-shocked after the arrival I'd received, and not much of the dean's tour had sunk in. Did they test all of you like that too? I asked when I caught up to them, more to make conversation than anything else. Katie shook her head and pulled her books to her chest. Not me. I was one of the first ones here. Even Brutus arrived after. Steph shook her head too, but Tabby nodded. Yeah, I was one of the first to arrive this semester too, but they still came at me pretty good. What happened? Tabby looked pretty normal to me, but appearances could be deceiving. I'd always known that, but I was learning pretty quickly that I didn't know anything about this world. Tabby shrugged. The chick came at me first, obviously, with me being a girl. They're fair like that. I put her on her butt. Then I kept up with Brutus too, which was fun. But I didn't like it when all of them attacked at once. That wasn't exactly cool. Case in point. The spiral-haired pretty girl had kicked their asses. So you know how to fight then? Tabby grinned. Yeah, my parents are still active members of the slaying world. Damn it. Why did my parents keep me in the dark for so long? We turned a corner and entered a massive room. I stopped, struck by a cacophony of sound that came from the hall filled with college kids. They all sat around on chairs eating and laughing. Whoa. Tabby grabbed my arm and tugged. Come on. Our suite sits over here. We walked over to a table closest to the window, and silence fell around me like a cloud descending. Everyone was staring at me. I turned to a large group of people to my right, where a strange red aura floated around most of the members. I didn't like the look of that aura. It was fiery, but something about it set my teeth on edge. Then I realized it was the group who'd scared the shit out of me yesterday, and held a sword to my throat. Brutus sat in the middle of the group as if holding court. He smiled at me with the light of a challenge dancing in his eyes. I turned away, trying to block them out, but I had a feeling I would be seeing him again soon. That group was trouble. And Brutus seemed to be their leader. I gestured to the food serving area. It was like a high school cafeteria, but didn't have anyone serving the line. Just tubs and trays of food for the taking. So what's the story? Do we just get what we want? Katie grinned. I need a coffee, so come on, I'll show you. Tabby joined us as we walked to the line, Katie still holding a book to her chest. This is kind of like my old school cafeteria, I said. But the food looks nicer. Katie nodded. Grab a plate and fill up. The coffee machine's over there. I'm gonna grab caffeine. Meet you back at the table. I strolled up and down the line, looking at what was available and noticing people leaving the hall in droves. Classes must start soon. I grabbed some fruit and a chocolate croissant and hurried back to the table. How long do we have? Tabby glanced at her watch. About 3 minutes. So eat quick. My stomach tightened with a strange mixture of excitement and dread. I shoved the croissant into my mouth and tucked an apple into my leather backpack. My present from my mom. She said she'd bought it for my college travels. Obviously, she'd anticipated this. Katie screwed the lid of her travel mug on tighter and grabbed her books. We better go. Okay, I'm coming. Like it or not, I was on this speeding train to God knew where. What had I gotten into? I walked out into the hallway and followed my new suitemates to my first Slayer Academy class. It was all strangely familiar and comforting in a way my old high school had never been. Nor the local community college that I'd attended for a year. This place was already beginning to feel like a second home, even though I didn't want it to. How do I know where to go next? I asked the girls around me. They all laughed. Tabby showed me the inside of one of her textbooks, where a schedule was taped. You should have been given a timetable. You didn't get one? I shook my head. No one had set me up properly for this, and I still wasn't sure why. The other girls had been trained and sent here earlier, and yet I was clueless. And apparently schedule-less. Tabby shrugged. That's weird. Maybe hang with us for now, then go see the office lady Maureen after lunch. She'll hook you up with everything, including a laptop and stuff. That was brilliant advice. I made a mental note to do exactly that, and followed everyone into the classroom. What's this? I whispered to Katie as we sat down in a massive lecture hall with stadium seating, with the ability to hold hundreds of students. It looked like the whole school was here. Is this just our year level, or? Yeah. Why? Katie took out her books from her backpack and a bunch of specially colored pens. I recognized a stationery, obsessed chick when I saw one. I didn't know why, but this room felt like it held too many people. As I did a quick head count, it was probably less than 100 people. It just felt like a lot. Maybe they all had strong and overwhelming auras. As I was musing, an older woman walked into the classroom from a door behind the podium. Her red hair was streaked with silver and swept up into a bun with chopsticks shoved through the mess of hair. She wore a long patchwork skirt and bangles galore. I loved the look, but could never pull it off myself. It would attract way too much attention. Welcome, she said into a microphone. Her voice echoed all around us, in front and behind. A quality sound system. Nice. Welcome to the brutal and violent history of the Fae. What a topic to start with. I'm Professor Boyd, for those who don't know me, she continued. I know that some of you are old hands at this, and others have never even heard the word Fae before this year. Or even this week. That was me. As I looked around the room, I saw several guilty smiles and shrugs. They were in the same boat. Thank goodness I wasn't alone. Others, like Brutus, who sat a few rows in front of me, didn't even flinch. I settled into my chair and listened hard. I could tell my entire existence was about to be blown apart, and I wanted to soak in as much information as I could. In the beginning, the Fae were good, Professor Boyd began. There was a strange grumble that rolled around the room. I didn't understand why. Some of the students seemed shocked, others angry at being told something they didn't agree with. What's with that? I whispered to Katie, who smiled but didn't say anything. I almost laughed. She didn't want to speak out of turn. She was more of a goody two-shoes than me. I was really beginning to like Katie. It's true, Professor Boyd said, adjusting her glasses on her nose. I know that your parents may have told you the watered-down version, but in this class, you will learn the whole truth, not what your parents want you to believe. A hush fell over the crowd, and a shiver of excitement rippled through my belly. Unlike the dean who'd made me uncomfortable and prickly, I had the feeling I would like Professor Boyd a whole lot. The Fae are the carers of nature, of the woods and the land. And as you can imagine, they weren't impressed when humans came into this country raping and pillaging the earth. What do you mean? A guy from the front row demanded in a tone that made the skin on my neck tingle. He had red hair and huge shoulders. I needed to remember him and steer clear. He wasn't good news. The professor simply smiled. What do you think they thought of us? Building our homes and destroying their rainforests to mine the land? There was a strange vibe in the room as the students looked at each other. It sounded like an age-old story of the natives of the land rising up against the invaders. And if that were true, why were we learning how to kill them? That sounded cruel and wrong. The Fae educated us in the beginning about nature and their ways. We worked together for a long time, in harmony. But when we didn't want to work as they did, accept the rules they lay down, they turned on us. And some would say rightly so. No. That was not the way it was, a guy from the front of the room said. My grandfather told me about the wars. When they slaughtered us. The professor sighed and looked down at the guy, as though she were speaking to a kindergartner. Nothing is black and white, young man. And these things happened long before your grandparents or your great-grandparents were even alive. We do know there was harmony. And then there wasn't. Most of the academics of our time believe the Fae struck first. They'd had enough of being ignored, of having the land changed under human rule, and they began to kill us. If that was true, the question was why? The professor continued. But the Fae have a long memory. They're immortal, unlike us, and unfortunately, they do not forgive the sins of the past. We are the enemy, and they hunt us like animals. I had so many questions whirling in my head, but I wasn't putting my hand up and drawing any attention to myself. People were already watching me, simply because of my mom's family name. The lecture went on, and my head was full to exploding by the end of it all. Although I had lots of new information, I also now had twice as many questions. A strange bell sound chimed and everyone packed up to leave, so I quickly followed suit. Where to next? I asked Katie, who glanced at her schedule. Weapons class? What? I thought of myself as intelligent, but it was beginning to dawn on me that this really wasn't a normal college. And I didn't know what was going to happen next. The next class was in a small room that reminded me of the gym at high school, but with wooden floors and mats and gym equipment. Yet, there was a slight difference. Weapons lined the walls, machetes and axes and swords and long knives. I shivered and pulled my sweater tighter around me. I was too inexperienced for this. I could hear my mom in my ear, telling me not to play with knives. What the hell was this? The male professor who walked into the room had thick, wavy hair, and wore a tight black tank and leather pants. The whole mood changed as he stepped into the middle of the room, behind a small lectern, to begin the class. Every girl in the room was heating up. I could practically smell the surge in pheromones. And as someone who was far too in tune with people's auras, it was making my own body heat and melt in embarrassing ways. Please grab a chair or a seat on the floor, he said. Normally this is more of a practical class, but today we'll be discussing the best ways to kill a Fae and the weapons that work best. My throat tightened and my stomach fell through the floor. They seriously wanted us to learn how to kill a person? Had my mom or my grandma killed people? Fae. This situation was getting crazier by the moment. I needed to know more, before I even considered hurting anyone. The Fae are most vulnerable when caught unaware, he said. If you give them time to use their magic, you'll never survive. They had magic? What sort of magic? And they expected us to attack unarmed people, before they attacked? This was not going to work, at least for me. I had no intention of killing anyone. The Fae draw their magic from the earth, so be careful when they are in a forest or somewhere natural, as they can draw large amounts of power. But what was their magic? And how did they use it? The lecturer went on about Fae strengths, but there wasn't enough detail for me. He either didn't know, and was only talking in generalities, or he was saving all the good stuff for later in the semester. Fae are immortal but can be killed by a solid steel blade, which is what we have to work with here. He walked over to the wall and pulled a sword from its resting place. This sword weighs over 30 pounds and will need a strong arm to wield it. It is over 200 years old and priceless. He went on to describe more of the weapons, the weight, the strength, the dimensions. They expected me to use them. Not just in these classes but on the Fae. Fae who had magic and could destroy me. Fae who I wasn't sure I wanted to fight. God help me. This day had just taken a turn for the worse. Chapter 9. By the end of weapons class, my head was pounding with all the new information about different swords and knives. I needed a break. But I also needed to get organized. I was out of my depth in the worst possible way. I spent lunchtime trying to get up to date with everything I needed. I made a sandwich to go in the ritzy lunchroom and went to meet Maureen. She was a kind older lady with gray streaked blonde hair, massive boobs, and a belly that reminded me of an old chicken. But she was clearly also sharp as a razor and hooked me up with a laptop, Wi-Fi, a schedule, and most importantly, a map. Despite the way the dean had made this place sound easy and straightforward, the Slayer Academy was huge, with never-ending corridors, identical-looking rooms, and way too many lecture halls for my liking. I couldn't tell one part of the building from another. A guy with long blonde hair walked past the IT room I was standing in, when the tinkling bell sounded to signal lunchtime had finished. Shit. I had no idea where I was. I rushed for him and reached for his arm, but he swung out of the way before I connected. "What do you want?" he asked, turning around and snapping his gaze at me. "I'm new and kinda lost. I need to get here." I lifted my schedule and pointed to the time block. He rolled his eyes, but at least he looked at my schedule and then pointed down the corridor. "It's down there. It has a big B on the door." "Thanks." I flashed him a smile and jogged down the hallway, looking for the big B. I skidded to a halt in front of the open door. I peered inside and my heart picked up its pace. This wasn't a lecture hall. This was a practical class. The male teacher with blue eyes looked at me with mild interest. "Come in, young lady." "And you are?" "Megara Kasikos." His eyes brightened, but he didn't say anything embarrassing, thankfully. "Ah yes, come. Sit." I stepped inside and looked around. There was the teacher and a small group of students, maybe 10 or 12. A small class compared to some of the others. As I shuffled across to sit on the floor next to a girl I didn't recognize, I was almost overwhelmed by the intensity of the room. There were instruments of death everywhere. Swords hung from the walls and even small knives that looked viciously sharp. "Today is your first training session. You will have one a day, every day, for the 3 years you are here." 3 years for college? I took some small comfort from that. At least it wasn't 4. Your physical combat skills are one of the main things that will keep you alive when you go up against a Fae opponent. We will teach you sword fighting, knife skills, and defensive moves this year. I'll get one volunteer up and I'll show you what we're going to do today, a classic defensive throw. He indicated to the jerk who'd watched me get beaten up yesterday. Brutus, I remembered his name was. The jerk got to his feet with ease. I was a bit surprised to see that he was in my year. I'd assumed yesterday that he was older. I sat and watched, my stomach clenching with anticipation and nerves. Hopefully, they wouldn't call on me to be the guinea pig. Not yet, at least. A Fae will strike often from behind, as they are cowards, the teacher said. I cocked my head to the side, a part of me not understanding the vehemence behind the words. Fae couldn't all be bad, could they? But what did I really know? 2 days ago, I'd had plans to get a job at the local Target and stock clothing in the ladies section. Now look where I was. For all I knew, every Fae could be a monster. Not fury, a little voice whispered in the back of my mind. Imagine a few different scenarios with your partner, and work through them together, slowly. Go over the shoulder, around the side to the ribs. With each description of a new attack, the teacher pretended to stab Brutus in those areas. I flinched every time. Brutus, come behind me. I'm going to throw you the way I want everyone to practice today, but slowly, showing each step. Don't fight me, just roll with the pull, all right? Brutus nodded, and I noticed the scar that bisected one of his eyebrows. When your partner thrusts forward with his pretend weapon, I want you to dip your shoulder, twist, watching my feet, take 2 steps, grab him by the top and throw him down. The teacher evaded the imaginary knife coming at him, then stepped around Brutus and pulled him to the ground. After this move you will, at the very least, have a chance to get away from your attacker. He grinned and sweat beaded on his upper lip. The teacher was enjoying this. Everyone up and find a partner, he said. My heart pounded faster. I looked to the girl who'd been sitting beside me, but Brutus grabbed my arm instead. Hey, Legacy. Partner with me. It wasn't a question, yet I wanted to refuse. As I stood, looking around the room, I realized all other potential partners were gone. The floor was covered with squishy mats, and everyone except me had prepared themselves for the class. They all wore comfortable clothes and had removed their shoes. I darted across to the wall and pulled off my boots. Yeah, I definitely should have brought more pairs of tights from home. I put my bag down and stripped off my sweater. I had stretchy jeans on at least and a thin tank top. There was too much of my body showing now. My thin arms' cleavage. But surely Brutus would be professional about this. I walked back over to where he was jumping up and down on the spot. You look like you're preparing to run, I said. He grinned and for the first time he looked friendly. Heat flowed up my neck and into my face. I'll attack you first, Legacy. What? So he could show everyone how stupid I was, because I couldn't even throw him to the ground. I scowled at him. It's Megara or Meg if you want. But since I didn't even know this place existed 48 hours ago, how about you give me a break and not try to kill me again? He lifted his eyebrows. Well then I'll go first. He turned his back on me. You attack, slowly. I groaned. This was stupid. Come on, he said, looking over his shoulder at me. I tuned into my body. My stomach wasn't hurting, nor were the hairs on my neck tingling. Nothing bad was going to happen. More than likely, I was going to get my ass whipped though. I balled my fingers into a fist, walked up behind him, and slowly moved my arm around in an arc, as though to punch him in the neck. He grabbed my arm, whirling me around and threw me on my butt before I'd even blinked. Despite the softness and thickness of the pads, my ass slammed hard and I could still feel the concrete beneath. He grinned down at me with an arrogance that grated on my nerves. Again. He reached out his hand. I ignored it, pushing up to my feet by myself. My turn. He nodded, still grinning like some stupid Cheshire cat. I desperately wanted to slap that smug expression right off his face, but I had the feeling that wouldn't be happening anytime soon. I walked back to our position on the mat, the sounds of grunts and laughter rising around us as the rest of the group practiced the basic skill. I turned my back and waited for him to come at me. I could feel him, his heat, sauntering up behind me. He stabbed me in the back with his fist and I twisted away and grabbed him, pulling him hard. He didn't move. He just looked at me as though I were an idiot. I stamped my foot, which on the plastic mat sounded juvenile and ineffective. I can't do it, I said, releasing him. Brutus laughed. You really have no training at all, do you? I pinned him with a glare. I told you, before yesterday I didn't know any of this existed. I gestured to the room around me and he shook his head. Fine. I'll help. Come at me, and I'll show you what to do. He spread his legs shoulder distance apart and waited. The bully wanted to help me? Since when? I blew out an impatient breath and pulled the tie from my hair. This was ridiculous. Utterly ridiculous. "Do you need help, Megara?" the teacher called from across the room. I swept my hair out of my eyes and up into a high ponytail, tying it quickly. "No, I'm okay. Thanks." I walked forward and pretended to stab Brutus in the back. "I'm going to slip to the right," he said, "because I'm left-handed, and twist by putting my left foot back. Watch." He did exactly as he said, my gaze riveted on his feet and the way they moved. Then he grabbed for my top, grazing his fingers along my belly and right up to place them between my breasts. "Grab the attacker hard and don't lose your grip or you're screwed." I nodded, my skin burning from the places he was holding. "Then you pull down and around. And you need to get out of the way. So pull like this." He dragged me forward and down, and I went with him to make it easier on both of us. Then he kind of threw me away, as he swiveled into the place I'd been standing. This time the fall didn't hurt so much. "See, it's not hard. You want to try?" he asked, offering me his hand. I took it, and let him lift me up. "Yeah. Thanks." He didn't drop my hand, so I had to tug it back out of his grip. My throat tightened as I tried to swallow. I wasn't sure what this guy wanted with me. He seemed oddly interested, but I definitely wasn't interested in return. At least, not beyond what he was helping me to learn. I narrowed my eyes, trying to figure out his game. What was I? A pity case? Or did he want to be the first one to sleep with the legacy? He sauntered away so that he could pretend to attack me, and I looked around, trying to figure out which direction he'd attack. This was the guy who'd helped that group threaten to kill me yesterday. He'd orchestrated it. Why wasn't I more frightened? I stood still, waiting for him to attack, my belly alight with butterflies. He stepped close and pressed into my back, and I immediately slid to the left, twisted around, and grabbed for his shirt. His abs came into view as I yanked and pulled. He stumbled forward and tripped, grabbing me as we tumbled to the floor. He rolled with me, ending up beneath him. I grunted at the impact. He pushed up on his hands and stared down at me. "I suppose that was kind of better," he said, not moving from his spot. His pelvis was right over mine, and I could feel everything digging into me. I wanted to knee him in the groin, but suspected he'd come back with some move equally unpleasant, so I laughed to break the tension and shoved at him. "Get off me. I'll try again." He took his time rising. I gritted my teeth at the obvious show of interest. I was certain it didn't come from a place of sexual desire. At least it didn't from my side, and I couldn't feel anything like that coming from him. What was he trying to achieve, pretending interest? The teacher clapped his hands and got everyone's attention. "That's it for today, guys. If you don't have enough training gear, and it looks like some of you do not, there's a shop on campus that sells every sort of clothing item you can think of, including training tights." He glanced my way and I smiled my thanks. "You can all go, and I'll see you tomorrow." Brutus caught my eye and smiled as I scurried off to pull on my boots and sweater. Other students gathered by the door watching us, including a pretty blonde girl who glared at me. I didn't know her. What was her problem? I ignored the glare and grabbed my bag and my schedule. One more class and I could go back to my room and sleep. I walked out into the hallway. Someone shoved me sideways into an empty classroom. "Hey." I whirled on the person. It was the girl who'd been glaring at me after the training class. "Who are you?" She had a pretty face and beautiful long hair, but her aura was cold. Deadly even. Just being in the same vicinity as her made me shiver. "I'm Selena, a second year, and Brutus is my boyfriend, so you'd better stay away from him." I wanted to laugh, but the girl was too scary for me to get away with that. I half expected her to pull some sort of weapon out of her leather bag, but luckily she didn't. I wasn't sure I was quite up to doing a twist and flip move for real. I put both of my hands up in a sign of surrender. "I promise you that I don't have any interest in stealing another girl's boyfriend. I'd never do that." Especially a bully like Brutus, I thought, but held my tongue at the last second. She glared at me. I saw the way you two were laughing and touching one another. That wasn't on me. I didn't realize he was taken, I said. But trust me, I have no interest in him at all. I'll make sure I grab a different partner next time. She glared at me with hard intent, the sparkling blueness of her eyes as cold as a winter sky. You do that. I won't warn you again. She stalked off, leaving me alone in a classroom that looked far more like the ones I'd left behind at high school. I sagged against one of the desks, my heart beating too fast. That girl was serious. They hadn't hurt me too much the first day I'd arrived, but I had the feeling if I stepped out of line, I wouldn't walk away so well a second time. And this girl would likely be first in line to attack. Chapter 10. After a decadent dinner of rib-eye steak with all the trimmings, I managed to get a shower. The bathrooms weren't shared by the whole population. There was one per suite, and between the four of us, it didn't seem too bad sharing so far. The girls seemed pretty fair about who used what and when, but that could change over time and in close quarters. I would enjoy it while I could. I stood beneath the warmth, letting the water wash over my aching arms and bruised ass. Today had been intense. The kind that was life-altering. What sort of world had I entered? It was nothing like I'd ever experienced, or even knew existed. My parents and grandmother had hidden so much from me. About themselves, and about who I was supposed to become. Part of me was angry with them for lying so much, but then again, would I have wanted to know that this was my fate? When would have been the appropriate time to tell me about it? I scrubbed at my skin more harshly than I needed to. Right from the beginning, would have been the right time. If I ever had kids, I would not keep this from them at all. It wasn't the first time I'd questioned my parents' judgment and decision-making. I'd been a push-the-boundaries teen like all my friends. But this was the first time I'd really found their judgment lacking. Hey Meg, you almost done? We've got to get to sleep pretty soon, Steph called through the door. I hadn't seen her most of the day. She seemed to be in different classes than me and my other two roommates. Yeah. 2 minutes. I called back and begrudgingly turned off the water. I would never had to do that at home. My parents had no issues with long showers. There were some perks to being an only child. I dried and dressed in my warmest pajamas, then returned to the room. Everyone was settling in for the night, so I climbed into my single bed. I hadn't slept in a single for years, and yet there was something to be said for the comforting cocoon effect of a small warm bed. Night, everyone. Katie's sweet voice was almost sing-song as she flicked off her bedside lamp, the only one still illuminating the room, and plunged us into darkness. Night, I called back as I snuggled beneath the covers and let my eyes drift closed. Despite the racing of my mind, I must have been physically exhausted as I floated easily into sleep, satisfied with my day of learning. As first days went, it actually hadn't been that bad. Everything about this place was a lot to take in. The history, the classes, the trainings. The whole we're Slayers learning to kill the evil Fae thing. But I was no slouch in the brains department. I could do this. I just had to learn how to fight. The music was pumping, the bass inspiring me to move my hips and swing them from side to side. But I shouldn't be dancing, not with this outfit on. I was wearing that damn mini again. Why did I let Holly dress me? I looked up and saw Fury among the sea of people. He was here. I waved to him and he walked closer. He wasn't smiling, but his eyes were intent on me. Why did it look like he was angry with me? He stepped up, and I tilted my head to look at him. He was tall. Taller than I remembered. And more beautiful. His skin was like marble. His lips like rose petals. So lush. So tempting. I wanted to run my fingers along the seam of his lips, and ask him to open them for me. What are you doing here? He asked. His tone wasn't happy. And I was confused suddenly. Why was he surprised to see me? You said we'd meet again. I smiled up at him, determined to break his bad mood. What a strange thing for him to say. This was my friend's party after all. You shouldn't be here, Megara. His tone was dark now. What do you mean? The room changed around us. The people disappeared, and we were left together with only darkness and music. There was something wrong with this guy. I knew it the first time I saw him. Only the pull toward him was so intense, I almost couldn't resist. My skin tingled and my belly ached. My skin felt hot, and I wanted to drape my arms around him and taste that beautiful mouth. But I couldn't. He was my enemy. Shock filled me when I looked down and realized I held a knife in my hand. Where had that come from? But I knew what I had to do with it. I swung my arm. He blocked my attack easily with his hand. He squeezed my wrist hard. I cried out as he forced me to drop the knife and closed my free hand into a fist. My anger mounted. I thrust forward trying to throat punch him. He threw me to the ground, and I managed to pull him down with me. My heart pounded with fear. This was wrong. I was going to lose. But I had to try. I was a legacy, after all. I screamed and clawed at him, scraping his skin and arching my back to try to get him off me. He pulled a knife from his belt and held it to my throat. The cold steel pressed against my skin. I froze, not even daring to swallow. My heartbeat slowed. I felt the seconds ticking by. He wanted to kill me, just like they said he would. The Fae hunted us, they wanted to kill us. Our eyes met. He stared at me like he'd never seen me before. Then recognition kicked in, and he pulled the knife away. You're not going to kill me? I asked, because it was pretty clear that was what he had intended to do. He shook his head slowly. No. There's something different about you. He hadn't gotten off me yet, and the mood between us shifted and changed. His body on top of me was arousing rather than terrifying. Desire rushed through me and centered in my core. I was heated and throbbing and ready. For him. How could that be? He shifted his weight and my thighs automatically opened for him. His breath hitched, hot on my neck, and I felt his arousal in the hardness of his flesh between us, saw it in the sudden flush of his cheeks as he lifted his head and stared down at me. He knew that I wanted him. Knew that I could sense his need in return. And he wasn't moving away, not yet. Meg. I startled awake and sat straight up in bed, my body aching with need. Where was I? The darkness. Tabby's voice. I was at the academy. I was safe. My heart didn't know that. It thundered in my chest, pumping adrenaline around my arms and legs and making me want to jump up and run. You okay? Tabby asked from her bed. You were yelling in your sleep. I swallowed hard. Of course I was. I'd been attacked. Almost killed. Sort of? Sorry, I muttered. Bad dream. I fell back onto my pillow and tried to force the sensual images from my mind. Fury was a part of this world, I could already tell. And, unfortunately, I was pretty sure he was a Fae. I was in training to become a Fae Slayer. Talk about a complicated relationship starter. I managed to arrive at breakfast a bit earlier than yesterday morning. I couldn't really go back to sleep properly after that dream. I was scared that if I let my mind go and relaxed into deep sleep, he would visit me again. Was it real? Could Fae enter your dreams and interact in that way? Or had it been my own brain conjuring him, the way normal dreams occurred? Either random, or reflective of the worries or concerns we might be having at the time. When I reached the mess hall and it was almost empty, I took advantage of the oatmeal and the fresh fruit platters they had out and piled my plate high. If we did physical training classes every day, then I was going to have to eat more. Keep up my strength? I already had trouble keeping weight on when I was stressed, so it was time to dig deep and find my carb-loving side. Not that it would be hard. Chocolate was my best friend. How'd you sleep in the end, Meg? Katie asked from across the table. She'd walked in and sat up at our table, while I was still serving myself breakfast. I swallowed my oatmeal, enjoying the heaviness and the warmth of it. I'm so sorry about waking you guys up last night, I said. I don't usually have bad dreams like that. Hopefully it wouldn't continue, or I would be the bad roommate that everyone wanted to move out. Nothing worse than getting woken from a sound sleep on a regular basis. What were you dreaming about? Katie asked, taking a sip of her coffee. Must have been bad. I opened my mouth to tell her about Fury, but stopped myself. If he was Fae, which my senses were telling me may be the case, contact with him was forbidden. Or I assumed it was. They hadn't really gotten to that part of my lessons yet. But I was pretty sure friendship with a sexy Fae wasn't a topic they covered. And dreaming about him? In this world, I was pretty sure that could get me locked up. Tabby arrived and pulled up a chair, her gorgeous hair bouncing with her movement. Hey! What are we talking about? My dream last night. I was just apologizing to Katie about that. I'm so sorry I woke you all. Tabby swiped at the air. All good. What was going on to freak you out so much? Someone was attacking me, I said, telling them at least part of the truth. I couldn't see them, but it was pretty scary. I think it might have been just a hangover from that training class yesterday. Tabby rubbed her hands together with glee. I can't wait until we get into battle classes. Nothing like learning how to use a sword. Swords? I shuddered. God, I thought yesterday was hard. These girls seem to be excited about sword play. Although it would be good to learn how to use one, and then if the bullies from my arrival came at me, I could at least fight back properly. What's your first class today, Meg? Tabby asked. I looked down at my schedule, now taped on the inside of one of my notebooks. Free period. I think I'm going to head to the library. Tabby laughed. Why waste it? You could go chill in our room, or go exploring. She wiggled her eyebrows. Katie looked down her nose at Tabby. The library's a great idea. I grinned at her. It was nice to have a fellow bookworm in the group. Honestly, I kind of need to catch up a bit. You guys are so far ahead of me, it's not even funny. I'm going to go see what I can learn. The bell tinkled and the girls grabbed their stuff. Katie smiled at me. See you at lunch. I packed my notebook into my bag and opened my map, looking for the library. Where was it? I studied the location on the map, figuring out where it was in relation to the mess hall. Most libraries were a large part of the school, so it wasn't too hard to locate. I navigated out of the mess hall, along a few hallways and actually managed to find it, mostly because it wasn't far from the dean's office. It was at least 3 times bigger than my high school library, and it rivaled the local town library at home for the height of bookcases and grand wooden staircases. I inhaled deeply, the stress of last night's dream disappearing among the tranquility of the books. Can I help you? The librarian asked, calling me over to the desk she stood behind. She had gray hair twirled up into a bun and spectacles that perched on the end of her nose. She was just perfect. My dream librarian. I'm new and don't know anything about the Fae, I said. Could you point me in the direction of a good book to start with? She gave me a big smile. There didn't appear to be even one other student in the library today. Perhaps I was the first person to set foot in here this semester. Though I suspected Katie would have beaten me to it. Those heavy books she was always carrying around with her weren't something to buy at a local bookstore. Yes, my dear. Absolutely, the librarian said. Can I have your student ID, and I'll log you into the computer so you can get started checking out books. I handed over the ID that Maureen had given me yesterday, and the librarian crooked her finger at me. Come this way. I followed her through the vast space, past bookcases upon bookcases, right to the back of the library where there were tables and chairs. "Have a seat," she said, "and I'll grab you something appropriate." I strolled past the sturdy chairs to a massive barrel couch. I put my bag down and slid onto it, instantly feeling at home. This would be my spot. The librarian came over to me with a big smile. "I think that's where your mother liked to sit." Shock shot through me. "You knew my mother?" "Of course. I've been the librarian here for well over 30 years. You're Moira Callum's girl, aren't you?" I nodded. This was surreal. And she liked to sit here too? The couch didn't look old enough to have been around 30 years ago, or whenever my mom had actually attended here. The woman smiled gently. "Not this particular couch, but we had another one here back then." But this was her spot. She was a bookworm too. Fierce though. "I can tell you have a lot of her in you." Tears tingled at the corners of my eyes, and I blinked rapidly to force them back. "Thanks. I'm not so sure about the fierce part." She smiled again. "Well, let's see, shall we? Knowledge is a powerful weapon after all. And ferocity can be learned." She handed me 2 large books, both of them thicker than the Bible and bound with leather covers. "Wow, thanks. They should keep you occupied for a while, but if you have any questions, I'm not far away." She left and I settled back more comfortably onto the couch. The knowledge that I was exactly where I needed to be descended over me like soft snow on a bright winter morning. It was a beautiful feeling, and I took a moment to enjoy it. I had an hour, may as well start one of the books before my next class. I opened one of the thick tomes on my lap and began to read about the Fae. According to the book, the Fae were a brutal race. They were the warriors of the forests and of magic. But if that were true, then they were protecting something that could not protect itself. How could it be bad to protect the forests? I was well into the 2nd chapter when the bell rang, sounding as though it was far away. My head was deep in the Fae forest, and pulling myself back to my present reality was strangely disappointing. I had to go. I shut the book I'd been reading, slid one into my bag and held the other. I rushed off to my next class, waving to the librarian as I went. Thankfully, next on my schedule was a classic science class. No magic or fighting in this one. I excelled at biology, and as the teacher began to ask questions for which I knew the answers, I settled into the feeling of being comfortable once again. I tried to enjoy it, because I knew the feeling wouldn't last. I would soon be swimming in stress and well out of my depth. After lunch was another practical class and a lecture on magic. Katie was in those classes, and I made sure to sit close by her side the whole time. She was quiet, but her aura was as solid as a rock, and I knew she'd help me if I floundered on anything. Unfortunately, Brutus was in almost all of my classes, which I found to be both strange and interesting. Every time I saw him, my heart jumped and my stomach clenched. I wasn't interested in him the same way I was with Fury, but there was something about him that said he would play a role in my future here. I wasn't sure if that role would be a positive one, but I knew we had unfinished business. I caught him looking at me all the time, even when he was sitting with Selena. Which was often. I couldn't help grinning at that. Her threat had annoyed me, and even though she didn't need to worry about me, her insecurities obviously had a basis. His constant staring was not a sign their relationship was going well. But that didn't mean I would go for him. Quite the opposite. I was aiming to survive here. Survive my classes, survive my strange dreams, and dig a bit deeper, so I could get to the bottom of the strange feeling that everything here was not as it seemed. Chapter 11. The next day I ditched weapons, my least favorite class, and took one of my Fae books to the library. I grabbed a hot chocolate from the cafeteria on the way, and settled in. I felt so much more comfortable in the serene quiet of the library, compared to the rest of the school. Especially on my couch at the back. It was slowly becoming my most favorite place. There was so much to learn, and yet the more I discovered, the more questions I had. How did all of this happen? Why were we constantly fighting the Fae? What happened in the first place to cause all of these problems? And who put us in charge as Slayers to keep the Fae in line? When my hot chocolate cup was empty, and I was well into the second hour of my free time, I stopped and stretched. My back hurt a little from not moving for so long. As I did so, my gaze caught on a chapter heading that made my breath hitch in my throat. Oh. The Fae and their ability to infiltrate our dreams. Holy shit. I read on, of course. And the more I read, the more I wished I could read it. According to my book, the Fae had the ability to enter someone's dreams and connect with them in that way. I looked up from the words on the page and stared distractedly at the back of a library bookcase. So did this mean that I wasn't simply dreaming about Fury, but Fury, wherever he was actually hijacking my dreams? Making me dream of him? Appearing there on purpose? Oh crap. I read on, unable to stop now. My breath caught in my throat. The more I read, the more my ribs tightened and my heart raced. What the book was describing, well, it was me. It was just like what had happened the other night. I'd known the experience felt too real to just be a dream, but that in itself had seemed crazy. How could a dream be real? I told myself not to be stupid, and that it couldn't be anything more than a dream. Well, obviously, it could be. The chapter spoke of the Fae invading the person's dreams to have conversations with them. The reason, according to the book, was unclear. More theories than anything else. To torture the humans, to seduce them. To influence their thoughts, and make them do things that were in the interests of the Fae. The assumptions were based on the premise that the Fae were evil, and they could therefore only have evil intentions if they invaded someone's dreams. Oh my God. I closed my eyes, thinking about Fury and how he made me feel. How could he be evil? He didn't seem to want to hurt me. Quite the opposite. What if the Fae just wanted to talk? To communicate? To explain their side of this ridiculous war? And what if no one was listening? I'd been dreaming about Fury every night, and there was always something strangely familiar about him and what happened during those dreams. Almost like we were developing a relationship of some sort. Which I knew to be impossible, but... oh no. My belly tightened and my skin prickled with unease. This was bad. Fury was coming to me for a reason. He'd found me that night at Claire's birthday party. And I'd been dreaming of him ever since. What if it was for terrible, nefarious reasons and I just couldn't sense it? What if he wanted me to do something horrible? Could he seduce me into it? Surely, with his magic and his centuries of knowledge, he could. I knew next to nothing about this world. I hadn't even known it existed, the night I met Fury. I would be the perfect patsy to approach. The worst part was, I didn't feel like there was anyone here I could tell about it. What if they made the assumption that I was a traitor? Would they try and kill me as well as the Fae? The bell rang and I jumped. Time for the next class, and I wasn't nearly ready to head out of the relative safety of the library. I slammed shut the book, cursing my need for knowledge. I'd been so much happier yesterday, submerged in my ignorance. I ran to class, only getting lost once and asking one of the older students for help. She was nice enough, but stared at me the same way everyone did, with strange unease and curiosity. I'd never had so much unwanted attention before. At high school and community college, I'd managed to fly under the radar. I was able to be weird and nerdy, and loved by just my small group of friends. Here, everyone knew me, or at least they knew the legacy of my family. The teachers, the librarian, the bullies, and the nerds. It was overwhelming being the most well-known person in the place, and it was mostly due to my mother. She must have been an amazing student and fighter. Had she killed any Fae herself? The thought made me feel faintly nauseous. I did not want to think of my mother, or my dad or grandmother for that matter, as a killer. I slipped in the back of another lecture on the dangerous Fae, and quietly made my way down to where Katie was sitting. She'd saved me a spare spot next to her. She smiled in greeting. She never spoke in class, but pulled the books off the table next to hers so I could sit and set up for taking notes. Warmth spilled through me as I realized we were building a friendship. Maybe I could eventually tell Katie about some of my concerns regarding Fury. Why don't you ask Megara? The words, spoken with a certain amount of venom, pulled me out of my daze. I lifted my head. Sorry. I wasn't listening. The whole class turned to stare at me, and with that came an intense flush of heat into my face. I hated it when that happened. I took slow, even, subtle breaths, willing my blush away. I'm sorry, Professor, I said. Was there a question? Professor Boyd smiled, but it was Brutus, of course, who had put me in the hot seat. He turned right around to stare at me. The professor was talking about pure bloods. The legacies. You're the only one we have this year, so I'm sure you carry more knowledge than all of us put together. Isn't that right? His eyes sparkled with what appeared to be anger. What was this guy's problem? What's wrong, Brutus? Jealous? I piped back. There was laughter and ooh noises from around me, and the professor shushed everyone by tapping on her lectern. Brutus's fake smile had become an instant scowl, so I stuck my tongue out at him on purpose, to try and lighten the mood. He really needed to let go of the legacy thing. His posture relaxed and his lip kicked up a little. That was enough. I lifted my gaze away from his scruffy face and focused on the professor, though I could still feel the heat of Brutus's stare coupled with that of the girl seated next to him. Selena. I studiously ignored them both. Katie moved closer and whispered, I can't believe you stood up to him like that. I grinned at her and whispered back, me either? And I can't believe you just spoke in class. I'd never stood up to anyone, including my parents. But that was then and this was now. There was something about this place that was forcing me to become stronger. And I was more determined to learn than ever before. Perhaps Mom should have sent me to summer camp when I was a kid. What was the worst thing Brutus could do? Throw me to the ground during fighting class and hurt me? Poke a sword at me? Set his bully gang on me, and get them to scare me? Yep, he'd done all of that already. And all because I was this damn legacy thing that clearly set off his temper. The lecture went on. A true slayer, a legacy, is a person with slaying blood. 2 parents and at least 2 grandparents who have all been slayers before you. The professor lifted her gaze to mine, and held it for a single moment before releasing me. Megara may be the only legacy you have in your level, but there are several year 2s and dozens of year 3s. Some believe they will have extraordinary skills and powers. Huh. Not this time, huh, Megara? Brutus shot back at me. I couldn't help it. I rolled my eyes. My parents sent me here with no knowledge of this world, and no physical training whatsoever. They wanted me to make it on my own. I dropped my gaze to his. Unlike some people who've probably been spoon-fed since birth. There was a rattle of laughter around me, and Tabby cackled from beside me. Stop it, guys. It's fine. Whether you're a first-generation slayer, second or third. I put up my hand. 5th. Oh my God, stop it. What's wrong with you? Katie hissed from beside me. But when I looked at her, I could tell she was secretly pleased, though blushing to high heaven from being so close to a rabble-rouser. Or that's what my grandmother would have called me. The professor went on, pushing her glasses up her nose and obviously disconcerted by our conversation. Yes, anyway. The stem of power, strength and knowledge is not sewn into your genes. You can all be incredible slayers if you work hard enough. I couldn't contain the grin on my face. What was wrong with me? Had the cafeteria put some sort of drug in my hot chocolate? I felt as high as a kite. I wanted to giggle and laugh and talk. But everyone else was settled and listening, so I listened too. Sort of. I wandered off in my head a bit, as the professor talked about the lineage of the Slayers. I wasn't really interested. My brain was tired and stressed. What sort of person did it make me, to be attracting a fae in my sleep? Had he been at that nightclub for Claire's birthday on purpose, waiting for me? Or had that been coincidence? Maybe he'd been there for someone else but smelled me or sensed me or something. I hadn't read anything about that yet. How did the fae know who was a slayer? I again felt the urge to giggle, and smothered it with a hand to my mouth. I was becoming hysterical. I hadn't been getting much deep sleep, with all the fury dreams lately. When the class was over and we headed out, Katie and Tabby stuck to my sides. To ward off others, maybe? It felt like a protection detail. "What are you guys doing?" I asked, clinging to my Fae history book. Katie touched my arm to get my attention. "Just making sure Brutus doesn't grab you." "Oh, he'll be fine. I hope." We turned a corner and there was Brutus, standing by himself, leaning up against a wall. My belly fluttered with a hint of nerves. Damn it, why did I let this guy get to me? We made to walk by and he pushed up from the wall slowly and put his hand out. "Yes, Brutus?" Tabby asked, her tone defensive and aggressive at the same time. He was looking at me though, so I met his gaze and raised my eyebrows. If he could play a game, so could I. "You know I was only playing with you, right?" he asked. "Sure." The venom in his tone really sent that message. "Is that an apology?" I asked. He tossed his head to get hair out of his eyes. "Apology for what?" "I was just checking that you knew we're cool. Right?" Katie grabbed my arm and held tight. "We've gotta get to chemistry." She pulled me around Brutus and off to our next class, Tabby right beside us. "Oh my god, he likes you." Tabby hissed at me, her brown eyes dancing with laughter. "Wait, what?" "He's got a funny way of showing it." Tabby nodded. "It's true. I know guys, and I can tell you he has a total hard-on for you." I rolled my eyes and looked at Katie, hoping for some better advice, though the smile I could feel pulling up my lips told me I didn't mind the idea that Brutus liked me. Why was that? When I compared him to Fury, Brutus came up short. In every way. But I'd never received attention from a popular guy before, and I had to admit, it boosted my confidence a little. All the girls wanted him. One had him. Allegedly. Katie bit her lip. "I agree. He never stops looking at you, and he loves drawing attention to you." "Yeah, but isn't that because he doesn't like me?" I looked between the two girls, who both shook their heads. I went on. "I mean, why would he try to embarrass me like that if he liked me? That's certainly not the way to my heart, I can tell you." Tabby jumped up and down. "That's why he came to apologize afterwards. He's only been trying to get your attention, and now he thinks you're angry at him. Oh god, it's too funny. Selena's gonna have a cow." I shook my head and pulled my friends into chemistry class. The conversation played on my mind for the rest of the day. What was going on with Brutus the bully? He could have anyone he wanted. Any year level. I'd seen all the girls watching him. Why would he want me? Was it because I was a legacy? Even as the flattery of him possibly liking me warmed my system, I felt vaguely uncomfortable with the whole idea. And I didn't know why. Chapter 12. As the month wore on, our training classes combined with some of the older students. It made sense as we became more advanced, but that scared me a little too. I was still way behind everyone else in skills, especially physically. I was catching up on the theory, and was pretty solid in my understanding of the Fae world now, or how the humans understood it. But this stuff, the actual fighting, was the class one worried about the most. Today, we're stepping it up a level, since the year 2s are going to join us for a little while. Our professor made the announcement with a grin. We'll be training with actual weapons. There was an overall sound of excitement that echoed around the training hall, while my stomach fell out of my body and landed on the floor in a heap. "Oh crap!" The professor indicated to the chests near the walls. Everyone, grab a sword from the beginners section. They are blunt but will still draw blood if swung hard enough. So pair up, be careful, and let's go. I turned to Millie, one of the girls I often partnered with. She was my age, quiet, and only slightly more capable than me. The alliance worked well for both of us. She held up her hand, and I noticed for the first time it was bandaged from the fingers to the middle of her forearm. I burnt myself in a spells class. Oh, you poor thing, I said, though I was suddenly feeling much sorrier for myself. With Millie injured, I would have to work with someone who actually knew what they were doing. Looks like you're stuck with me. I closed my eyes, refusing to look up from my seated position on the floor. I knew that voice. It was Brutus. I sighed, glancing around for another partner. Since that first day Selena had threatened me, I'd never partnered with Brutus again. I looked over at her, standing several feet away with another male. Why wasn't she working with her boyfriend if she cared so much? Come on, Legacy, he said with a devilish grin. Everyone else appeared to be partnered up. What choice did I have? He offered a hand to hoist me up off the ground, but I ignored it and rolled to a stand without his help. This interaction wasn't going to be good. I could just feel it. And of course, it had to be the day that I wore my new training outfit. I walked over to the edge of the mats where I'd left my boots and stripped off my big warm sweater. Underneath, I wore the new clothes I'd bought with some of the money Mom had transferred, a skin-tight black wraparound top that was warm and flexible for training. Not to mention, it was super tight, so that it was harder for someone to grab me. I hadn't thought about the fact that it highlighted the size and shape of my boobs, not to mention the tininess of my waist. I also had a new pair of bright purple tights. They accentuated my ass, in a little too much detail for fighting with a guy whose body seemed to like being on top of mine. I dressed to spar with Millie, not Brutus. I took a deep breath and turned around, determined to ignore the attraction I could read simmering in his eyes, and pulled a tie from my wrist to snag my hair up into a high ponytail. Come with me, he said, and I begrudgingly followed him over to where the weapons lay in large ornate chests. He stood too close. I could feel his breath on my neck. Choose one you can swing easily, not one that looks good, he said. I looked down at the swords, then picked one that caught my eye. My arm buckled. Brutus chuckled, as he took the heavy sword from me and set it down again. Grab the gold one. I picked it up, and it came easily even though it felt solid. Good advice. I looked at him and smiled. Maybe this wouldn't be so bad after all. Thanks. He grabbed a broadsword as wide as my head from the pile. Damn. I trudged after him to a free corner, resting my sword over my shoulder. In the corner, he took position facing me. I raised my sword. Softly, just begin the way they've taught you, he said. He was being gentle with me. I knew he had to have an ulterior motive, but at this point I was grateful for his help. Brutus swung his sword at me, but without any power. I lifted my own weapon, and followed what I'd been taught in the previous lessons to block his strike. We began to slowly and quietly parry our swords. Feel the weight. Let it rest in your hand properly. And mind your stance. Weight equal on both legs, the teacher said as he strolled through the rows of students battling at the speed of turtles. I adjusted my stance accordingly. I had a tendency to always put my weight on my back leg. Trying to get away, most likely. Brutus grinned, obviously pleased to have gotten his way this time. He finally had my attention. You've been avoiding me, he said. I stared back, unsure why he cared. Your girlfriend warned me to stay away. He raised his eyebrows, dropping his sword to his side. I'd obviously surprised him. Selena? Well, isn't that interesting? I didn't realize she was the jealous type. The professor yelled out, "Attack!" Brutus swung at my head in a wide arc. I ducked and swung back at him, which he parried. Hard. The metal vibrated in my hand and stung my palm. You've got to stay on your toes in more than one way, Brutus said as he circled me and came at me again, swinging the sword at my body. I spun away. It reminded me too much of that first day, when I was outnumbered, lost and scared. Well, not anymore. I'd come a long way since then, even though it had really only been a few weeks. Oh really? I said. Tell me, oh great one. He grinned, a sparkle lighting up his eyes. The Fae are very manipulative, Legacy. You don't know anything about them yet, so I'm going to tell you. They will do whatever they need to do, in order to control us. Because of that, we are at a disadvantage since most humans are weak. I swung my sword at his legs and he blocked my attack, pushing my blade back at me. I grinned at him. Then I better keep learning. I twirled and danced with him, and I had to admit I was having the most fun I'd had since arriving. Brutus was all smiles and laughter, moving at my pace, for which I was grateful. I was out of breath and my heart was pounding, but I was finally feeling like I might be getting the hang of this fighting thing. Then he swung his broadsword hard, and knocked my flimsy one out of my hand. I glared at him, and kneeled down to pick it up. What was he doing? I knew he was better than me at this. Stronger, faster and more practiced. As I reached for the hilt, Brutus pressed the tip of his weapon to my throat. I froze and looked up at him, confused. I thought we'd been having a good time. Up. 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 He tapped the cold steel against my chin and I flinched at the hard look in his eyes. He wasn't playing around. I rose slowly, carefully, with my hands up. And my heart pounding. He met my gaze with a penetrating stare. Don't let anyone seduce you into dropping your guard, Meg. Not even me. Selena hurried over, laughing hard. You teaching her a lesson, Brutus? Absolutely. With a grin, he slung his free arm around her shoulders and they strolled off together. I grabbed up my sword, anger swirling in my gut. Fucking asshole. I wouldn't be off my guard around him again. Never. That night when I climbed into bed, my body ached even more than normal. My head throbbed with my usual headache, and my arms found it hard to even lift the blankets after my sword fight with Brutus today. He'd pushed me hard and taught me a lesson, all in the space of one class. Do not trust him, I reminded myself. I wasn't sure how long it was going to take me to get used to the pace and training of this place, but I was nowhere near the level of fitness needed yet. The girls in the room settled into their own beds, Katie's night light staying on as she read tucked under her covers. I was so exhausted I couldn't stay awake to chat tonight, though I'd begun to enjoy the nightly ritual of catching up on everyone's news. Night everyone, I said. The other girls bid me to sleep well, and I drifted off without much more thought. The music was more my pace this time. Softer, more melodic. Easy to dance to. I was wearing a dress, but it fell all the way to my ankles, so I could dance however I liked, and not worry about exposing parts of my body. I raised my arms and tilted my head back, swaying to the rhythm and beat of the music. Megara. His whisper slid into my ear like honey, deep and sexy. Fury. I tried to turn. To face him. But I couldn't move. He wouldn't let me. He was standing directly behind me. His hands were around my waist, locking me into place. It felt divine being in his arms. Dance with me, he said in a tone that made me shiver. And not with fear. I closed my eyes. What choice did I have when the request was so simple? I began to move with him, rolling my hips in a curling figure eight, his pelvis pressed against my ass. I dropped my head back against his shoulder and let the feelings consume me. It was so good to be free of my world stressors. No more classes. No more constriction. No more feeling like a failure. Just music. And my body. And him. You are the most beautiful woman, he whispered. I need to touch you. He reached down and grabbed the hem of my dress, scrunching it up slowly, the breeze catching on my legs. He kept bringing the dress up. Way up. Until his hand was on my bare belly, sliding up to cup my breasts. I didn't care. Why would I? This wasn't real. The world around me wasn't either. There wasn't even a club anymore, just swirling warmth around us. I moaned and pressed back against him harder, showing him how much I wanted this. I tilted my head to the side as he began to kiss my neck, my throat. It was too good. Too much. I turned in his arms and this time he let me. I offered up my lips to his. He stepped back and tugged the dress off my body entirely. I was naked instantly. Where had my underwear gone? I didn't care. I wasn't cold. Wherever we were, it was warm. He lifted me up like I weighed nothing. I wrapped my legs around his waist and he pressed me against a nearby wall. What wall? I didn't know. It didn't matter. He stared at me like I was the sexiest person he'd ever met. My core melted and my heart sang. There was no doubt here. This was so good. So right. Every cell in my body wanted him. Kiss me, please. I was begging now, clawing at him. He lifted me further up the wall and pressed his body against mine. Our lips met and my breath was stolen from my chest, where my heart beat an erratic tattoo against my ribcage. But then the tingles started, and not the good kind. The ones that prickled my flesh and screamed at me that danger was afoot. This was bad. This was very bad. I pulled back from his kiss, gasping for breath. My skin tingled as his fingers sought access between my thighs. My aching, slick flesh was so ready for his touch. I grabbed his face and pulled up his jaw so I could look into his eyes. This is wrong, I said. We have to stop. Why? He asked, his face full of confusion. Because you're Fae. Megara. He groaned and pulled away. I was standing alone in the dark. In my own dream. And he was gone, his voice whispering in my mind. You don't understand. Chapter 13. A couple of months passed, and I was finally getting used to life at the academy. I was kicking ass in all the normal theory subjects, my brain loving the challenge of things I'd never studied before. But I was still getting my butt kicked in the practical sessions. I couldn't win them all. Though I wanted to. It rankled that I was doing so poorly in such an important subject. I was determined to get better. I couldn't have the likes of Brutus standing over me for the rest of my life. My suite mates were all lovely, Katie especially. We took long walks and studied together most days now. My teachers were helpful, and I felt like it wouldn't be long until I could finally wield a sword with skill. I practiced almost every day. Nighttime was the hardest. I would lie awake in my comfortable bed, afraid to go to sleep for only one reason. The dreams. But the Sandman always came, no matter how hard I fought against it. My mind and body were just too tired from the day of classes to stay awake much past midnight. And every night he found me. Fury. Sometimes we would just talk in the woods or in a dark room. The setting changed each time. But I couldn't stop myself from telling him things. About my parents, my schooling, or even the flowers in the field I'd found one evening on a walk. Other nights were full of sexy, flaming hot dreams where he brought me to the brink of ecstasy, and I woke in a sweat. This morning was one of those mornings. I came awake on an orgasm, my body tightening and clenching. I gasped out my pleasure as I emerged from sleep, and tried not to wake the others as my pussy continued to pulse with need. Fuck, I was in trouble here. Why did Fury have such a hold on me? Was it simply because he was Fae? Or did we have something more? Something special? My body was absolutely aching for more, and these dreams only made everything harder for me to concentrate during the day. If Fury was half as seductive in real life as he was in my dreams, I would be in big trouble if we ever met again. Not that it seemed to matter. Despite the dreams and my fear that he would step back into my life somehow, I had not seen hide nor hair of him outside sleep. Perhaps this really was all just in my imagination? Did I need to feel this close to a man I'd met for 15 minutes just once? That didn't say many good things about me and myself, confidence, or my experience with relationships. I grabbed my cell phone from my side table and glanced at the screen. It was just past 6. Not quite time to get up, but too late to go back to sleep. I twitched and stretched beneath the covers. My mind was racing with all the things I needed to do today. I had a test in history, a lab in biology. I needed to borrow the History of Fae book that I wasn't finished with. Damn it. I needed to get up. I had to get rid of all this nervous energy. So, I decided on a run. I sat up as quietly as possible and pulled my sneakers out from under my bed. I'd bought a pair from the Academy student shop a few weeks ago, as the weather improved, and I wanted to be outside more. Horrendously expensive, but there was money in my account. So I spent it. I looked around the dimly lit room and shivered in the cool early morning air. I grabbed my sports bra from the drawer, pulled off my sleeping t-shirt and slipped the bra on. Then I tugged on my tank and my hoodie. I could run in these tights, they were comfy and warm. I stood up and checked my mental list in case I'd forgotten anything. I wasn't going far. Just had to get rid of this tension. My arms and legs were practically shaking with adrenaline and the aftermath of my orgasm. I snuck across the floor and opened the door, pausing as a creak ricocheted underfoot. I glanced back at my 3 sleeping suitemates. No one stirred. I jogged along the hallway, the cold morning air making my nose tingle. The door that led to the north end of the academy loomed in front of me, and I pushed it open. The fall air iced my face and I took a quick breath. My aching pussy quieted as my arms trembled in the cold. Time to move. I hurried to stay warm, jumping across the cobblestones around the park benches and street lamps. Luckily, they were still lit in the dark of the early morning. When I hit a straight flat path, I started to run. I ran as far as I could, into the forest behind the academy. Katie had told me we weren't supposed to go past the West Forest line. The students called it the Grizzled Forest. But the whole academy was surrounded by trees, so I ran toward the south, assuming the forest in that direction wasn't forbidden, as it was only the west that had been mentioned as forbidden. They hadn't explained why, and for some reason at this moment, I didn't care about another of the many rules the academy liked to push on us. I just kept running, loving the zing of adrenaline along my veins and the cold air filling my lungs. My heart was pounding and my lips were frozen, but my mind was clear. I began to slow down in a quiet part of the forest. I was finally, truly alone. Something that was quite rare nowadays. I sighed as I set my back against a tree to rest and sucked in air, my knees shaking with the stress of the run. I hadn't been alone since I got here, and the change was kind of nice. After so many years of being an only child and a bit of a loner, the freedom I got from being by myself was exhilarating. My gaze flicked upwards, and a calm washed over me when I saw the sun was finally coming up. Flashes of red raced across the sky. A hint of yellow, and then light touched the forest for the first time on this day. I felt at peace. As if I was finally home. Eventually, I decided it was time to head back. I was rewarding myself with a big breakfast this morning. Hot chocolate and a ham and cheese croissant. No oatmeal or fruit for me today. Calories be damned. My jeans were falling off me with all the training. I pushed off the tree, my legs screaming in protest. But I couldn't. I had breakfast waiting for me. I jogged on the way back to the academy building, keeping my legs moving until the academy stretched above me like a grand stone mansion. There was something or someone ahead. As I got closer, I recognized Brutus's shaggy brown hair and tall muscular build. My stomach tightened and my sense of peace faded. I slowed down as he jogged toward me, a cheeky smile lifting his lips. Hey, Legacy. What are you doing out here by yourself? Everything okay? I didn't bother correcting him. The nickname had stuck, but fortunately he was the only one to use it. I panted for air, my heart beating fast from the run. Yeah, just needed a run this morning. He took the last few steps so that he was now within touching distance. He put his hand out and cupped my face. The heat of his skin was startling. It felt right and wrong all at the same time. "You're freezing," he said. "Let's get you somewhere warm. My room's just near here. Come on." He was seriously asking me to come to his bedroom? Who did he think I was? One of the slutty ones? Oh, I don't think that's. He waved a hand to ward off my impending rejection. "It's okay," he said. "Come on. To be honest, I've kinda wanted to talk to you alone since day one, but you're always surrounded." A trickle of happiness spread through me. Katie and Tabby were still convinced that Brutus liked me, but I hadn't seen any more signs. "Or you're with what's her name," I countered. He grinned and opened the door into the hallway that led to the boys' wing. I looked at his offered open door, then glanced toward the girls' wing. Then back at the guy grinning at me. I was suddenly angry at Fury for only appearing in my dreams. And intrigued at the idea that Brutus might actually like me. It was only to chat, he'd said. What did I have to lose? I strolled over to him, pleased to be out of the cold air. I stepped inside the warm hallway and rubbed my tingling hands together. "Which way?" "Just here." He opened a door right next to the exit, and I stepped into a single room with a double bed and a desk. "Wow," I said, standing just inside the doorway. "How do you rate a private room?" I hadn't even known they existed. I'd assumed, obviously wrongly, that everyone had to share with at least one other person, if not three, like me. He shrugged. "My parents are rich. And I like my space. I'm an only child." I grinned at him. That was a good excuse. "So am I, but my parents aren't rich," I said. "I'm in a room with 4 single beds and 3 other girls." He laughed and sat on the large bed, still rumpled. He patted the spot next to him. "Come on, Legacy, sit for a bit." Did he seriously want me to sit on his bed for a chat? We weren't friends. Not in the way I was with Tabby and Katie. What about? How could I never remember her name? He shrugged. "Selena? We aren't actually together the way she thinks, we just..." He stopped. "Screw regularly?" I suggested, and he laughed. "Yeah, on occasion." Finally, I sat down on his bed, drawn there by a force I couldn't put my finger on. I made sure we weren't touching, but turned so I could look at him. "So, are you a legacy too? Is that why you tease me about it so much?" "Not really. I mean, both my parents came here, but they were mediocre slayers. And only one of my grandparents came here, so no, I don't qualify. You, my friend, are the real deal." I shoved at him. "Oh, shut up." I was nothing of the sort, and he knew it. He grabbed my hand and drew me closer. I held my breath, waiting for him to make the move. I knew I shouldn't even be here, let alone be letting him do this, but part of me wanted him to kiss me. I wanted someone to want me, to touch me. Someone real. I closed my eyes and it happened. His lips touched mine and I opened my mouth as he slipped his tongue inside. I leaned closer and slid my fingers into his hair. It felt good, but the squiggle in my belly, the one I got from Dream Guy Fury, was missing. I let him continue to kiss me, while I pondered that and what it might mean. There was a loud pounding on the door, and a male voice called through the wood panel. "Hey, Brute! Ready for breakfast?" I jumped away, my stomach tight with stress. I couldn't believe that had just happened. I got to my feet and put my hand to my lips. No time to dwell on it now. Instead, I grabbed the door handle and tried to make a sophisticated exit. Which was ruined somewhat when I had to peek around the door first and make sure the other guy had left. Thank goodness he had. See you in class," I said awkwardly. He grinned from the bed and half-waved. I bolted from the room, heading for my dorm, where there was a whirl of noise and girls getting ready and I could escape from the shrieking inside my mind. That's what happens when you have sexy dreams every night, and the sexy guy refuses to materialize in real life. I'd just done something really stupid. Hopefully no one would find out, and Selena's threats wouldn't become reality. Chapter 14. I've got a double open period this morning, Brutus said, as he sidled up next to me just after breakfast. Katie was off getting her normal double-shot coffee, but Tabby was there and she looked on with interest. I stared down at my books, trying not to show my nerves. Oh yeah. I hesitated before I added, so do I. Was he suggesting we spend it together? He touched my arm to get my attention and I stood up, grabbing my History of the Fae book. What do you usually do, Legacy? The bell rang, and Tabby excused herself with a long backward glance as she left. She was going to ask a lot of questions later. I ran a hand through my unruly hair, embarrassed to admit how much of a bookworm I was. I usually go to the library. It had become my favorite place in the whole academy. The librarian and I were now on a first-name basis. Brutus didn't look surprised. Well, how about you give that a miss for one day, and I give you a private training lesson instead? I narrowed my eyes. You do that? Was he planning on threatening me with a sword again, to prove he was superior? I damn well hoped not. Not after this morning's kiss. He grinned and my belly tightened. I knew that look, and I had to ask. This could get both of us in serious trouble. What about Selena? He shrugged. We're having a bit of a break. She's super clingy. Can't cope. So, he was saying the way was clear to pursue me? I pushed my hair out of my eyes, my skin tingling in the good way. What did you have in mind? Well, most of the classrooms will be full, he said. Can we use your room? Mine's rather small, as you know. He grinned again, and a pulse began to tug deep in my belly. It felt so nice to have a guy want me in that way. Sure. I agreed, my throat tightening with nerves. The other three have classes until lunch. Yeah, I know. I didn't ask how he knew. Instead, we just started walking back to my room. What do you want to work on? I asked as we ambled along the hall closer to my room. Brutus answered as though he had real intent to train. Defensive maneuvers are probably your biggest weakness. Let's start there. Thanks for noticing. Great. I began to believe that he actually wanted to train with me, so as I opened the door to my room, my mind raced over all the moves I'd be practicing and needed help with. But as soon as the door was shut, he pressed me back against the wall, taking my mouth with his. He kissed my lips and ran his fingers along the bare skin of my waist before slipping beneath my tank top to touch my back. Every touch fanned the flames of arousal I'd been carrying for weeks now. But the thing was, they weren't flames for Brutus, and even as I let him continue to kiss me, fury kept coming into my head. Nightly dreams of fury had made me so weak. So needy. But this wasn't him. This was a real-life guy. I was horny as hell, and apparently Brutus liked me. How could I not go for it? I pulled away and he dropped his hands away. You don't want this? He asked. I was breathing deeply as I studied him. Up till now, I'd thought of Brutus as a bully, preying on the weak. But the fact that he would stop if I asked him to, unlike several guys I knew, made him one of the good ones in my view. I felt so torn. On the one hand, it was flattering that he liked me, and if I gave in and said yes, I had the feeling it would make his treatment of me better from here on out. And fury, damn him, had left me horny and aching with need. But they were not good reasons to say yes to this. When I closed my eyes and kissed Brutus, it wasn't him I was thinking of. I would be doing both of us a disservice if I let this continue. As I opened my mouth to tell him he needed to leave, the hairs on my neck stood on end and I shivered. A warning. My spidey senses had just kicked into play. I wasn't sure why, but I had to trust them. My instincts were confirming not to go all the way with Brutus. I cleared my throat. This was more than awkward. I do like you, Brutus, but... I stopped when his eyes widened in obvious shock. He had asked if I wanted this, But he hadn't expected me to actually say no? Then his gaze turned speculative. I couldn't figure out what was going on in his mind. He sounded normal when he said, "Okay then. Wrong time, wrong place? My bad. So, are you up for a simple cuddle then, Meg?" I guess." He gestured. "Which one's yours?" I pointed to my bed, and he took a couple of strides and sat down. "Come on then. Tell me about your life before the academy. How did you find out about this place? Slayers and everything?" I had the sense he was playing with my mind a little, in an effort to cover his annoyance over my rejection, but my spidey senses had settled. He didn't mean me any harm. So I made my way over and sat down on the bed beside him. He wrapped an arm around my shoulders and drew us down until we were lying there together. "What do you want to know?" My brain felt foggy with confusion, about him and about my own feelings, and in the end it seemed easier to just go along with pretending we were friends. Which I suppose we were in a weird way. "I want to know everything," he said in a smug tone. "In case it wasn't clear, I like you, Legacy. I want to learn more about you." I woke to someone banging on the door. It took me a minute to work out where the noise was coming from, but as I opened my eyes, it became apparent it was my bedroom door. I lifted my head from the warm chest I was cradled against and stared at Brutus in a mystified way. What had happened? Why was he in my room? In my bed? He grinned, and everything came back to me in a rush. Oh my God! I'd fallen asleep. On top of him. Heat rushed into my cheeks as I quickly sat up. Oh thank God. I hadn't drooled on him. That was one small saving grace at least. The banging started up again. "Hey. Meg. It's Selena, can you open the door?" Oh my God. I jumped to my feet, staggering sideways as Brutus and I exchanged gazes. How were we going to get out of this one? We hadn't actually done anything, but it wouldn't look that way. "Megara?" Selena called again. "Yeah, hang on. I was having a nap. I'll be there in a sec," I called out to her. Brutus shook his head and rolled his eyes. What? A girl couldn't take a nap? I'd had literally hardly any sleep for weeks. Thanks to my visiting Fae. Thank God I'd locked the door. "You've got to sneak out," I whispered to him as he stumbled up off my bed. He nodded, and headed to the nearby window. He pushed it open and jumped onto the ledge. He turned back for a final smile and then disappeared. I pulled the window shut, grateful we were on the ground floor. I ran my hands through my hair and then walked over to the door, my heart in my throat. I was so ashamed of myself. Even though I hadn't done anything except briefly kiss Brutus and then accidentally fall asleep on him, this so wasn't me. I couldn't cope with the stress. I exhaled slowly, attempting to calm my thumping pulse. I reached for the door handle and pulled it open, trying to appear calm. "Selena. Hey. Sorry, I had a shower and fell asleep after." I could feel the sleep still in my eyes that gave truth to my words. "Can I come in?" she asked, then bit her lip as though she were upset about something. I checked her aura. It was no longer red and angry, as it normally was around me. Should I let her in? Sure. But mind the mess we're not like super clean with sharing. Fuck. Could she smell Brutus? Did he wear aftershave or anything? I sniffed the air, and couldn't smell anything except the lingering scent of hair and perfume products from my roommates. She pushed past me and waved her hands. "Oh, don't worry. My sweet mates are pigs too." She stood in the middle of the room, looking around. There was nowhere to sit other than the beds. I pointed to the far corner. "Sit on Katie's bed if you want. It's the maid one." I straightened my blankets and jumped onto my bed. Selena perched on the edge of Katie's bed, on the pale blue and pink striped coverlet. I settled in and stared at her. "So what's up, Selena? Why was she here?" She couldn't possibly know that Brutus had been here, could she? Did she have people watching him? I need your help, she said in a rush. Brutus has gone totally distant with me, and I want you to help me get him back. Whoa. Talk about one out of left field. Me? How would I know how to get him back? So, he hadn't lied about them being on some sort of break. She twisted her hands together. He likes you. He did, but I still didn't get the connection. Did you guys break up? He'd said they weren't officially together, but how much could I trust him? Selena looked down at the carpet. Well, our relationship isn't exactly conventional. But I love him. And I want things to go back to the way they were. I still don't know how I can help, Selena. I mean, Brutus and I aren't exactly friends or anything. We hadn't been. Now, I wasn't sure what we were. I know, and that's probably my fault. I know I scared you off him that first day. But he talks about you. He wants to be friends. I thought maybe you could ask him what's wrong for me. What I can do to make things better. The poor girl actually teared up while she spoke. Then she sniffed and lifted her head proudly. I took a deep breath and let it out slowly. I can talk to him for you, Selena, or I can try anyway. But from what I gather from Brutus, he likes forthright women. Just be honest, be aggressive. Tell him what you want. She nodded. Okay, but you'll talk to him for me too, yeah? I think he'd listen to you. I was beginning to see why Brutus didn't keep Selena as his actual girlfriend. Guys didn't want females who were clingy, whiny, or sent other girls in their stead to plead their case. He wouldn't like this. Surely she could see that. I will, but I don't know how effective it'll be, I said. Especially since the guy seemed pretty sex-starved. There was no way Selena was keeping him happy if he'd come looking for me. There was another knock, and Brutus pushed open the door. Hey Legacy, you in here? Speak of the devil and you'll see the tip of my tail. Yep. I'm here. I waved from my bed and gave him an awkward smile. Had he bothered to go back to his room? Or just walked around to an entry and come straight here? You ready to go to training? He asked, his tone slightly off. I risked a look at Selena, who was staring at Brutus with narrowed eyes. He looked at me, and I slid my gaze over to Selena, who jumped off Katie's bed with an angry blaze of red aura blooming around her. Great. We were back to the old status quo, it seemed. What are you doing here, Brutus? He turned to Selena. I told Legacy I'd help her with her sword technique. You saw the other day how much she needs it. While I didn't appreciate the insult, he had a point. Thanks, but... I started, but Selena cut me off. You said you guys weren't friends, she hissed at me. We're not, we're... Brutus turned toward his spitting ex-girlfriend or whatever she was. What's this about, Selena? What are you doing here? You don't like Legacy, and you've made that pretty fucking clear. I took that as my cue to leave. Even though they were in my room. I'm going to give you guys some privacy. See you later. I slipped out the door and hurried away. The noise of their escalating fight followed me all the way to the mess hall. I was starving. A giggle escaped my lips as I exhaled a shuddering breath. What a day. What a mess. I found the lunch hall abuzz with preparations. There was nothing out yet except warm rolls, and I snatched up two. There was nothing better than soft, white bread. I didn't care how much they said gluten was indigestible for most of the population. I wanted it. I bit into the roll and moaned. God, I needed this. I waved at one of the cooks I'd gotten to know, and she waved back. I looked at the clock. I still had about 15 minutes until they served anything decent to eat. The other students would be getting out of class soon, too. I wandered over to the tall, old windows and gazed out on the grizzled forest to the west of the academy. I still didn't know why it was forbidden for students to enter that part of the grounds. It wasn't fenced off or anything, which was stupid if the area was dangerous. Didn't they know that 19-year-olds didn't have fully formed brains? We still didn't totally understand consequences properly. I turned away, and a familiar voice whispered into my ear. Megara. I spun around, but there was no one within 10 feet of me. Megara, look out the window. I knew that voice all too well. From my dreams. I did as he asked and looked toward the forbidden forest. He was there. I could feel him. Come outside, Megara. I need to talk to you. He was contacting me in the daytime now, too? Why should I? I asked, quietly so no one could hear me and think I was crazy. Though what was crazy in a place like this? Where every student was being trained to kill an enemy none of us had ever met. Please, Megara. How could I say no to that cajoling voice? I groaned. Fine. I'm coming. I stomped over to the exit door and pushed it open. If this was really going to happen, that would mean I would see Fury again. I could ask him questions and figure out if he really was one of the Fae everyone here talked about. My enemy. I shuddered as I stepped outside. The sun was high, and yet the chill of the air made me shiver. I should have grabbed my coat, but there was no way I was going back to my room with those two possibly still fighting. Fury's voice kept speaking to me. Come into the woods, Megara. Please. I need to see you. I stared at the forest, and then back toward the safety of the academy building. I'm not supposed to. It was part of the law of the place. It was actually in the code. No Slayer, which I still didn't consider myself, was allowed near the grizzled forest. Come on, Megara. Come on. The urgency in his voice was what got me. What could possibly be that important? I don't know. I paced the ground next to the building, indecision warring inside of me. My instincts whispered at me to go to him. I didn't even know if the voice inside my head was real or not. Or if it did belong to the man I dreamed about, a man I had met only once before coming here. As I stared at the grizzled forest, my heart thumping in my chest, curiosity ate at me. With the memories of my dreams tugging at me, binding me to this man who probably wasn't a man at all, I started walking. I reached the edge of the gnarled forbidden woods, and the temperature became more temperate. I stopped shivering. I reached out and felt the difference with my fingers. There was a mild spring warmth in the air. The rest of me could use heating up like that. Wow. Now that is a cool trick. Was this part of the forest magic? What else would explain the incredible change in atmospheric temperature? I stepped past the boundary and the warmth enveloped me like a warm shower all at once. I shivered out the rest of the cold, and stood admiring the magic it would take to create such a pocket. Had I stepped into another land? Was this fairy? I shivered again, a tense note playing in my head now. I'd come unarmed, led by a voice in my head that only I could hear. Now who was the legacy? I checked my senses again, and although I was nervous to find out what happened next, there were no warnings for me. There was more than a touch of excitement that these woods were definitely enchanted. The air was different, thicker still. The history of Fae had said that the Fae commanded the trees, the earth, all of nature. I could definitely feel them in the land around me. And there was no evil, no blood spilled, no dread. Why was I here? I took more steps and whispered out to him, "Where are you? Come deeper." I sighed, and glanced back to the entrance I'd taken into the woods. I could see the academy from this place, but it would soon be gone from view if I kept going. Would I be able to get back there after this? I'd better, or Fury would be in big trouble. I ventured farther into the woods, following whatever instincts I still had, until I found a clearing of sorts, with a huge stone circle and trinkets hanging from trees. I stared up at the sky twinkling through the canopy, the sunshine on my face. This was a place of strong Fae magic. I just knew it. There were no signs of violence, nor sacrifices. Why are you showing me this? I asked. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and my whole body began to tingle and scream with an inevitable evil. Uh-oh. That was all the warning I got before two males stepped into the clearing where I was standing. They looked as shocked to see me as I was to see them. They had swords on their backs and pointed ears that reminded me of elves. They narrowed their eyes at me and drew their swords almost as one, baring their teeth and leaping close. I stumbled backwards, trying to get away from them, but they were quick and nimble and obviously knew this terrain well. "What are you doing here, human?" one of them snarled at me, and I lifted up my hands to show them I was unarmed. "I mean no harm." "Impossible. You are a slayer. I can smell the hatred on you," the other said as they began to circle me. Fear catapulted through me and my mind raced. "Hatred? Me?" I repeated, swallowing hard. "That's impossible. I've never hurt anyone in my life." And it was true. "You are a human," the first man said. "Your kind always mean harm." The second one, with flashing green eyes, lifted his sword and advanced on me. I backed away, tripping over branches and tree roots. "No. No. Look. I came completely unarmed. Fury told me to come." They stopped and stared at each other, then turned back to me. The green-eyed one, still holding his sword pointed at me, said, "You lie." He lifted his sword and swung it at my head. I ducked and twisted away, mentally thanking Brutus for the last training lesson he gave me. Holy shit. Stop. Don't you understand? I'm not even a slayer. I'm a first year. What does that mean? The first Fae man asked, hissing at me through his teeth. I couldn't breathe. Terror ripped through my body, but at the same time, a thrill almost of recognition rippled along my veins. It was like my body knew these two men, and responded to them with a lick of desire similar to the one Fury incited deep inside me. But that was impossible. I had never met these two men before in my life. Was there something wrong with me? Was I destined to feel a sexual pull with every Fae I met? "It means that I'm not trained," I stammered. "I don't know anything yet." "You violated the law we put on this forest. That it was not to be touched. You got through the walls, so you must have magic of your own." I stayed on my toes, ready to run. "What do you mean?" I asked. I had magic? What sort of magic? I knew slayers had to be fast and smart, and willing to push the boundaries of themselves and the world around them. Don't play dumb with me. You're a human. You've been trained to lie, but I can see through you. Prepare to die. Die? Me? At 19? Not a chance. I pivoted on the balls of my feet, and ran through the woods back the way I'd come. The trees slashed at me and my leg caught on a branch. I staggered sideways and kept going. They were just behind me. I could hear them grunting, their footfalls heavy on the dirt. I recognized the swing of steel from class and ducked and changed direction. One of the Fae yelled out in obvious frustration. Nope. No. Not dying today over some stupid ancient feud that I had nothing to do with. My spidey senses tingled again, loudly, and I ducked and weaved around a tree. The sword cut into the tree as one of the Fae swung. The second Fae was hard on his heels, both of them coming at me. Stop this, I yelled back at them, not slowing down. You need to stop and listen to me. The second Fae swung at me, though he did so with less enthusiasm. I jumped to the left to dodge a tree. You have to listen to me. Please. I came here. Don't listen to her. She lies, the second Fae snarled, and they both rushed after me again with renewed vigor. I ran toward the clearing. I had to get back to the safety of the academy. I didn't know why, but maybe the stone circle would help me. Fury, where are you? Did you set this up? I ran all the way to the clearing, looking for the way out, my senses screaming at me to flee. To get away. But they were right behind me. I'd never get to the academy before they reached me. I threw myself into the stone circle, landing on my knees, and stayed very still. Surely, they wouldn't kill me in this holy place. The Fae arrived seconds later and began to circle, looking down on me as one would a toad in their kitchen. "The sacred stones will not save you, human," the first Fae said. "You have no power here." They lifted their swords and held them strong, the muscles in their arms bulging. Tears tingled in my nose and eyes. My throat burned as I gasped for breath. Fear drenched my body in a hot sweat. This was it. They were going to kill me. And I didn't even know why. Only one semester into the academy, and I was about to become the Fae's first student victim for the year. The supposed legacy. How fucking ironic. Chapter 15. The Fae pressed his cold blade to my throat. I stared up at him, refusing to close my eyes and cower, even though that's exactly what I felt like doing. Vaguely, I realized my leg was bleeding. I could feel the wetness dripping down my leg. I couldn't run and I couldn't scream. What good would it do me if I did? I was out of options. "Please don't kill me," I said, my voice trembling despite my resolve to remain calm. The Fae with the sword pulled it away from my skin and leaned forward. His brows came together in a quizzical frown as he studied me. Why shouldn't I? There was a note in his voice I didn't understand. He sounded almost puzzled. "When your kind has killed my family for centuries, why should I show you mercy?" He wanted to talk, which was a good sign. It was something. I forced myself to speak, though my tongue was thick and my whole body quivered. "That's only because you attacked us first," I said. "We had to defend ourselves." The second Fae stepped forward and kicked me in the chest. Pain pulsed through my lungs as I landed in the dirt, my hands cutting on the rocks beneath my palms. I coughed and gasped, putting a hand to my ribs. Damn, that hurt. I glared up at them. "What's wrong with you? Why would you do that?" "Wrong? You're the one who's wrong. We tried to be peaceful, even offered your ancestors food, shelter, and magic. But they killed the Fae who offered their friendship. Those first emissaries. And you humans kept going until there were barely any of us left in this country. Your kind are pure evil." I pushed up onto my knees, the pain receding below my panic. That wasn't me. I wiped dirt from my eyes. That was centuries ago. Please. I can go back to the academy, try and get things to change. I want to help. Pain closed my throat, but it wasn't my pain. It was his. This man, this Fae, was in so much pain. It radiated off him in waves, entwining with my own fear and making my soul hurt. I was the embodiment of everything that was wrong with his world. "I'm so sorry," I whispered, tears sprouting as I lived his agony. His grief of loss. His lips parted as if I'd shocked him. Then his brows came down. "You lie," he said, lifting his sword. Terror quaked through me, warning me to run. But I was frozen and hurt, and there was nothing I could do but wait for my death. "Everly, no." Fiore's voice boomed into the clearing, and then he jumped in front of me. The Fae with the sword staggered back. Fiore crouched down and turned, lifting me up into his arms. A wave of relief coursed over me. He was here to save me. Thank God for that. I looked up at his set jaw. He glared at the other two men in the clearing. "About time you got here." I wriggled in his grip, uncomfortable at being held like a baby. He eased me down, though he pushed me back and stepped partly in front of me to block me from the other two Fae. I peeked over his shoulder, studying their faces properly for the first time. They had high cheekbones and porcelain skin, attractive in a similar way to Fiore. They wore beautiful clothes too, with long flowing robes and embroidered shirts. I had no idea how old the two Fae were. They looked to be in their 20s, maybe 30. I couldn't tell. But they were strong and tall and handsome. And Fae. Just like my mother had warned me. Dangerous. Alluring. Deadly. As I stared from one to the other, then up to Fiore, a wave of desire hit me. It was so strong I let out a gasp. I couldn't tell which of them had ignited it. Or perhaps it was all of them. Maybe that was the power of a fae. To reel you in sexually, lower your defenses and then strike. I swallowed hard. I was out of my depth, in ways I didn't even understand. Fury, you cannot protect this human, the third fae declared. Fury stood straight. I can and I will. Megara is mine. I claim her. She is not to be harmed. Tell everyone. The men stared at him, their jaws dropping. You can't do that, Everly said. He couldn't do what? Did he just say that I was his? His claim? I had to look that up in my book when I got back to the library. I had the feeling there was no way he was going to explain it to me. And I could tell it was important. Fury didn't back down. I can and I already have. They slid their swords into the sheaths on their backs. Then you need to send her back, Everly said. Now. She's not safe here. I grabbed Fiore's sleeve and tugged to get his attention. What's going on? Why did you call for me? He turned and stared at me. His gaze pierced my soul and I gasped for air. What was the connection between us? He reached for me, then drew his hand back. I wanted to speak with you. I'm sorry you were in danger, because I did not come quickly enough. I looked over at the two other fae, who stepped away, giving us space. Who are they? Us? Everly said, gesturing to himself. I am Everly, and this is Nair. Together with Fury, we are the rulers of the three Fae kingdoms. You should show us some respect, human. Fury rolled his eyes and I laughed. I couldn't help it. Are you serious? Fury, is this true? You three are rulers? I swallowed hard, the inevitable cavern between us widening even further. My ribs tightened. You're a king? A Fae king? How was that possible? He was at that club, in the human world. Why? I asked. I stared at him, hoping he understood my question. Surely he would. He shook his head slowly. I can't, Megara. I stepped closer to him, tears blinding my already overwhelmed emotions. You can't tell me why you were there? Why me? Or why there is such a feud between Fae and humans? What can't you, Fury? Please, what does all this mean? He cupped my cheek. The other two Fae walked away with grunts and angry mumblings. I looked up at him, waiting for the truth, not wanting to be separated from him. I opened my mouth. Fury. It was the one named Nair. Come with us, he called out. You know you cannot stay with her. Especially not here. I reached out for him as he stepped back. He hesitated and pressed his lips to my forehead, the touch warm even in the spring, like air. I gasped as ripples of pleasure pulsed through me, grounding me, completing me, and every spidey sense within me tingled in the best way. You need to leave, Megara? Quickly. I nodded, and began to scurry away toward the edge of the forest. It was like an invisible veil separated this warm pocket from the cold academy air on the other side. When I reached the edge of the forest, I extended my arm, feeling the cold of my world rushing back. I turned back, wanting to see him one more time. In that one long lingering look, I saw my fate change forever. Chapter 16. I moved around the trees and through the weird force field that separated the grizzled forest from our world. The shock of the cold made my skin burn, so I wrapped my arms around my body. I ambled back to the academy, deliberately taking my time. I needed to process what had just happened. My body shook with adrenaline that had coursed my system since the attack, and my legs ached with muscle cramps. I had just survived 3 of the deadliest beings in the forest. According to the academy teachings. My heart hammered in my chest. I had pushed my body past its limits. I hobbled all the way back into the mess hall. Where should I go? What should I do? Who should I tell? I looked around the loud room, not seeing anyone I knew well enough or trusted with the information I needed to share. Except Legacy. Brutus sauntered up with a smile on his face. He didn't touch me, however, and I was grateful for that. What's wrong, Megara? You look scared. Wait, is that blood? I stared down at my leg. Blood had soaked through my clothing and trickled down my calf. I'd gotten away with my life intact. The rest could be fixed with some stitches and gauze. Yeah. I hurt myself in the forest. Which forest? You didn't go into the grizzled forest? His eyes widened and his eyebrows rose high on his forehead. I nodded. Yeah. I did. But what happened? What did you see? He grabbed my arm, squeezing hard as excitement lit his face. I came across 3 Fae men. I stopped, unsure what else to tell him. He'd grown up in this world and his hatred for the Fae ran deep. You saw the Fae? Brutus grabbed me by both arms. It hurt, but I tried not to flinch. Yes. I did. I tried to shake off his grip. You can let go, you know. He dropped his hands away. Did you kill them? I shook my head. I went in unarmed. I didn't expect to come across anyone. I swallowed. That was a lie. I had expected to see someone, but not someone who wanted to kill me. I wasn't ready to tell Brutus my history with Fury, though. 2 of them tried to kill me, and probably would have succeeded, but a 3rd Fae man came along and stopped them. He saved me. Brutus's mouth opened and closed, then his eyebrows narrowed and he took a step back. I don't believe you. I bristled. What do you mean, you don't believe me? It's the truth. Why would I lie? I don't believe you. You're making it up, because you've always thought killing the Fae was wrong. You ignore all the knowledge, everything the lecturers say about them being evil. Otherwise, why would you go into the forest? I couldn't answer that. I didn't want him to know why. I do believe the history. I study every day. Why can't you believe there would be one Fae who may not be a murderer? He was not being rational, at all. He glared at me with a heat I hadn't expected. Because they're all evil. He turned and walked away, leaving me totally flummoxed. Was the hatred and misunderstanding of the Fae that widespread and blind? I had to tell someone who would believe me. Katie and Tabby entered the mess hall and approached. Tabby grabbed my arm and pulled me across the room to a quieter corner. Hey, what happened with Brutus this morning? Hang on, what happened to you? She looked at my bleeding leg with slight horror. I hurt myself in the forest. I need to go speak to the dean about something. Can you save me a spot in the next lesson? Next lesson? Katie repeated. It's dinner time. You were missing all afternoon. No one knew where you were. I turned and looked out the window, noticing the darkening sky. How had that happened? Did time alter inside the Fae world? Go faster. I hadn't read anything like that in any of the books so far. I hobbled out of the room and went straight to the dean's office. I had to tell my story to the head of the academy. He had to at least listen to me. Surely he would be a little more open-minded than the rest of the school seemed to be. I knocked on his door and entered when he called out. I'm sorry to interrupt, but can I have a moment of your time? The dean nodded. Of course. I told him of my experience in the woods. About being drawn out by Fury, then being attacked by the other 2 Fae and how Fury had saved me. I left off the part about my insides igniting into need in their presence. He didn't need to know that. By the time I'd finished, my heart was pounding and my voice trembled with the strain. I still couldn't believe I'd lived through it. That sounds interesting, Megara. He tapped his fingers against his chin thoughtfully. Though unlikely. What? I threw my hands up in the air, my exasperation showing. Why would I make any of this up? You don't know our ways, nor those of the Fae. I understand that your parents kept this world from you for most of your life. But those of us that have experienced many encounters with the Fae know them to be dangerous, evil, and aggressive. Their immortality has made them not respectful of human life. I shook my head. You're wrong. Or you're wrong about Fury. He seems different than the others. The dean glanced at his watch. Megara, I have an appointment, but please, let me know if you have any more information to share. I'm not against learning new things or being proven wrong. But I must go now. I'm already late for a staff meeting. He ushered me out of the room and stalked off down the hallway. Had he taken in anything I'd said, or just dismissed it? Did these people think I'd lie about something so momentous? I checked the wound on my leg. It wasn't deep, but it was still wet with blood, and the trickle didn't seem to be stopping, so I headed over to the academy nurse's office. She cleaned the gash, added sticky strips and bandaged it up, declaring there was no need for any stitches. My appetite was gone, and my head was spinning with all the information swirling around inside it. I couldn't deal with people anymore today. Instead, I walked straight back to my room and curled up on my bed, immensely pleased that my roommates hadn't yet returned to our suite. The library closed after dinner time. Otherwise, I would have curled up in my barrel chair and stayed there all night. The academy and its teachers were wrong. Not just about the nature of the Fae, but about the history of the feud between us. I opened my big book on Fae history and began reading. The assumptions were wrong. The humans who'd written the books were wrong. They had to be. That Fae Everly, the one in the forest who'd wanted to kill me, had been in so much pain. His aura had been dark with sadness and grief. He had carried that pain for so long. How many of his family had the humans killed? Everything they were teaching us, the Slayers, was wrong. I could sense that with every fiber of my being. And I wasn't stopping until I found the truth. After months of feeling lost and wading through the course load like I was swimming in a thick soup, I had a direction. It wasn't the direction they all wanted me to take. I was supposed to follow in my parents' and grandparents' footsteps and become a legendary slayer of the allegedly evil Fae. That wasn't happening. I had a new task, and I was determined to succeed. I was going to become the first slayer to find out if the cause we were fighting for was actually worth the lives lost. And I was going to figure out a way to end this feud. I just had to pray I didn't die trying. The end of part 1. Read on in part 2, here.